Chapter 283. Han Yu was really unlucky. Yesterday, he managed to persuade Cheng Jing to go to Jishan's hot spring with him. But they didn't know which hot spring Yuanjing and the others went to. They had no choice but to send someone to ask, so they wasted a lot of time and happened to run into the prince of the Count of Jinbei. In terms of blood relations, Han Yu was not related to the prince of the Count of Jinbei. But if they were to be calculative, the two of them were still related. The prince of the Count of Jinbei was the son of a concubine, so his status was slightly higher when he was invited to be the prince, so he was raised by his legal mother. Unfortunately, the legal mother was Han Yu's father's sister, so she was Han Yu's aunt. He knew that his aunt didn't like the son of a concubine, but she had to be nice to him for the sake of the Count of Jinbei. Han Yu thought about his aunt and was aware of the current situation in Dongqing. He was afraid that something bad would happen to him, so he tried to persuade him. The prince of the Count of Jinbei was arrogant and spoiled, but he still knew how to be respectful to Han Yu. However, it was useless to be respectful. Although he said that he wouldn't do anything stupid, his body still went to the brothel. Cheng Jing snorted at that place and didn't go. Han Yu felt a little uneasy, but he couldn't stop the prince, so he followed him. He hoped that nothing bad would happen with him watching. Coincidentally, the courtesan queen was selling her virginity at a high price. The courtesan queen was so beautiful that the prince of the Count of Jinbei was attracted to her. He wanted to buy her virginity at a high price, but unfortunately, he ran into the spoiled nobles of the northern borderline, so the two sides got into a fight. The prince of the Count of Jinbei killed someone in the chaos because he had the advantage in numbers. Han Yu tried to stop him, but he was accidentally injured. It didn't matter if he was accidentally injured or not. What mattered was that the prince of the Count of Jinbei died in the belly of the courtesan queen. But the northern borderline didn't want to let it go. They insisted that it had something to do with Han Yu and dragged him into the mess, hoping that Dongqing would hand over Han Yu and give them an explanation. Jiang Pingji suddenly asked after listening to Lu Shi's story, "Father, did anyone expose Han Yu's identity last night? For example, did they say that he was Master Yuanjing's disciple?" Feng Jin listened carefully at the side. He was deep in thought. When Jiang Pingji asked, he suddenly understood. "Lanting, do you mean that the northern borderline is targeting Master Yuanjing by holding on to Han Yu?" Jiang Pingji nodded and said with certainty, "The crown prince of the Count of Jinbei died suddenly in such a manner. He died a dishonorable death. The northern borderline should be very satisfied, but they didn't stop. Instead, they pushed Han Yu to the teeth of the storm and made things difficult for him. Of course, they have other plans. Han Yu was not a sensitive person like the prince of the Count of Jinbei. Why would the northern borderline target him for no reason?" Jiang Pingji's conjecture made sense. Lu Shi remembered something after being reminded by her. Mr. Yuanjing had a war of words with the barbarians of the three tribes of the northern borderline. He argued for what was right and took back the three cities. The peace envoy sent by the northern borderline was called Wu Lisir. He was one of the few barbarians who liked to read. It was just that this person was obstinate and self-opinionated. He had no respect for anyone. After reading a few classics and historical collections, he felt that he was well versed in the culture of the Central Plains. He was the one who suggested that the royal court of the northern borderline negotiate with Dongqing. He offered 3 more cities, surrender, and annual tribute coins. He was not good at learning and was blindly arrogant. He gambled with Mr. Yuanjing and lost the 3 cities. He was so angry that he died. When Jiang Pingji heard the name Wu Lisir, she suddenly thought of the barbarian general Wu Liba whom she had met before. Lu Shi seemed to see the doubt in her eyes. He suddenly smiled. Wu Lisir is Wu Liba's uncle. Their tribe is called the Wise in the northern borderline. They serve the royal court as strategists or generals. In the northern borderline, people eat raw meat and drink blood. They are backward and barbaric. They also advocate looting. Few people have brains. When Dongqing was founded, they didn't take them seriously. But the recent 2 generations of the royal family of the northern borderline are quite courageous. They gradually realize the importance of brains, so they focus on promoting the wise. I guess they still bear a grudge against Wu Lisir's death. Lu Shi had always looked down on the three tribes of the northern borderline. He also didn't think that they could rule the Central Plains, because the ratio of muscles in their brains was too high. A tribe that only knew how to destroy civilization, but didn't know how to preserve, create, or continue civilization was destined to be inferior. Feng Jin listened carefully. His eyebrows were tightly knitted. So the northern borderline wants to make things difficult for Mr. Yuanjing? Lu Shi said. They probably want to show off. Wu Liser was known as the wisest person in the northern borderline. There were even rumors that he was the reincarnation of Civil Star. He enjoyed a very high reputation in the northern borderline. If he wasn't so confident and determined that he would win, why would he be willing to bet the 3 cities with Mr. Yuanjing? In the end, Wu Liser almost couldn't fight back. The northern borderline's face was swollen. It was a small matter that his face was swollen. Wu Liser was so angry that he vomited blood on the spot. After he went back, he was depressed and died of anger within a few days. Mr. Yuanjing trampled on the faces of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. He was able to live peacefully in Langyi. It was a skill, Feng Jin said worriedly. So Han Yu and Mr. Yuanjing, won't they be in danger? The northern borderline obviously wanted to take this opportunity to get back at them. Even if they didn't kill Mr. Yuanjing, they would kill Han Yu, or kill both of them to ruin their reputation. For scholars, reputation and dignity were far more important than their own lives. Not to mention Mr. Yuanjing, who was a famous teacher in the 9 prefectures. Compared to Feng Jin's worries, Jiang Pingji looked calm. She seemed to be enjoying a good show. She said, Huaiyu, do you think Mr. Yuanjing will be troubled by such a small thing? He has been famous for many years. Although she had only met Mr. Yuanjing a few times, and he seemed to be just an ordinary middle-aged man with profound knowledge and a kind personality, Jiang Pingji had always been a good judge of character. Although Mr. Yuanjing's appearance was getting old, his eyes were still young and full of vitality. Feng Jin was speechless. Jiang Pingji said with certainty, I believe that Mr. will solve this problem beautifully. In less than 3 days. Why 3 days? Because the evaluation would start in 3 days. And Han Yu would also have to participate. Unless Feng Jin was so unlucky that he hurt his hand and couldn't write, Mr. Yuanjing would never let his beloved disciple miss such an important life event. If he couldn't even do this, it would be a waste of the high praise and affirmation of the people in the world. Jiang Pingji also felt that there was no need for her to study under such a teacher. Chapter 284. Master Yuanjing looked at the koi fish swimming in the pond in the courtyard, and said with a gentle expression, It's good that you're back. Han Yu was fine, but he was a little nervous. I'm an unfilial disciple. I got you involved in this, and almost ruined your reputation. Seeing Han Yu kneeling on the ground, Master Yuanjing laughed. Get up. You've never been so obedient before. Han Yu was anxious. He didn't know what his master would give him in exchange for his safety from the northern borderline. It would be terrible if this incident was exaggerated and people said that Master Yuanjing secretly colluded with the northern borderline. It's okay. The letter I wrote will not be used against you. Why are you being so careful? Han Yu was relieved to hear that. Master Yuanjing waved at him and said, Come closer to me. Han Yu did as he was told and moved closer. Master Yuanjing raised his right hand and pinched Han Yu's face. It hurt a little. After a long time, Master Yuanjing showed a complicated expression. Han Yu didn't know whether it was joy or worry. You may leave. If there's nothing else, call Zixiao over. Master Yuanjing let go of his hand and turned to feed the koi fish in the pond without looking at Han Yu. Han Yu had never seen Master Yuanjing like this. He was anxious, but he still went to call Wei Ci. You're different. He didn't expect Wei Ci to say that as soon as they met. What's different? Han Yu felt creeped out by Wei Ci's stare. Nothing. Wei Ci lowered his eyes and frowned. Since my master asked me to go, I shouldn't keep him waiting. Wei Ci sighed in his heart and left the confused Han Yu. The dark clouds in his heart gradually dispersed. Han Yu was puzzled. Why are they all so strange? The world is so big and full of strange things. The same person can change so much in just a few days. I feel like I've lived for decades in vain. Master Yuanjing noticed Wei Xiai as soon as he approached. He said with emotion, "Zixiao, do you think this disaster is a blessing or a curse?" Wei Xiai said, "For Dongqing it's a disaster, not a blessing. For Wenbin it's a blessing, not a curse." The accidental death of the Crown Prince of Jinbei Marquis was completely out of Wei Xi's expectations. He did not need to think to know that after this fuse was lit, Dongqing's situation in the next few years would be very grim. The pace of the chaotic world coming was much earlier than he remembered. Fortune and misfortune go hand in hand. Dongqing was unlucky, but Hanyu was lucky. Wei Xiai had left Dongqing a long time ago, but he had kept in touch with his classmates through letters, so he more or less knew what had happened to them. Hanyu bore the misfortune of having his entire family wiped out. Based on his physiognomy alone, he was lacking in fortune. The inner courtyard had a calamity of love, and the palace of husband and wife was in decline. Because of the calamity of women, he was destined to die prematurely in his prime. In fact, it was true. When Hanyu was middle-aged, his wife's family rebelled against him and was quelled. After the incident was exposed, he wrote a confession letter and committed suicide by swallowing gold. Wei Xiai had learned from Master Yuanjing and was quite accomplished in reading people's faces. Naturally, he could see the changes in Hanyu's facial features. Master Yuanjing smiled and said, "From the looks of it, Lu Shi is indeed the destined one." Wei Xiai said in a soft but firm voice, "She is." Master Yuanjing was gratified at first, but then he showed a complicated expression. She is still an unpolished jade. Although Lu Zhongqing has been guiding her, the effect is minimal. She is cruel and ruthless. If she doesn't change, I'm afraid she can't be a wise ruler. Wei Xiai was silent. Could he say that Her Majesty had restrained herself a lot? She was not a wise ruler. She was not even close to being a wise ruler. The history books were mixed. Some people praised her for being open-minded, while others slandered her for being tyrannical. The former was debatable, while the latter was notorious. Master Yuanjing tilted his head and seemed to be thinking. For a man in his 40s or 50s, this action was suspected of maliciously acting cute, but it complimented the person who was unusually young and energetic. Wei Xiai said softly, "She is an unpolished jade, not a stubborn stone. No matter how much a stubborn stone is polished, it is still a stubborn stone. But an unpolished jade is different." He didn't know what had changed, but he could see the changes in Jiang Pingji. Master Yuanjing smiled kindly after hearing that. He raised his hand and knocked on Wei Xi's head. "You don't mean what you say." Wei Xiai lowered his head and looked embarrassed. The news that Hanyu was out of danger had spread throughout Shangjing. Those who paid close attention to the matter had received the news. I wonder what Master Yuanjing wrote that made the northern borderline given so easily. Feng Jin, the wounded man, had a comfortable life. Although he was a little depressed that he couldn't participate in the assessment, he quickly adjusted his mentality. While others were still writing furiously and reading through the night, he was drinking wine and fighting with Jiang Pingji on the chessboard. Jiang Pingji pouted and said, "The people in the northern borderline have muscles in their brains." Master Yuanjing's content must have hit the nail on the head to make such a boorish man bow down. The kind that slaps people in the face, and they don't dare to make a sound. Jiang Pingji's judgment was almost always correct, even about Master Yuanjing. Feng Jin was curious and said, "Then guess, what did he write?" "Guess? I guess there are 3 possibilities. First, it's a strategy to attack the city and subdue the enemy. It's a vital part of the hinterland of the northern borderline. But no matter how wonderful the strategy is, it needs to be executed by the military force. If Master Yuanjing presents a strategy to subdue the enemy in the northern borderline, it's mainly a deterrent. It's a silent message. Did you see that? Such a strategy can kill you. If Dongqing can't handle it, I can rely on a country that can kill you." Feng Jin was amused by Jiang Pingji's vivid simulation. He almost choked on his breath. Jiang Pingji mumbled, "Second, maybe it's a secret of the northern borderline?" Feng Jin finally stopped smiling and asked her, "What about the third?" He knew Jiang Pingji was talking nonsense, but she had a serious expression on her face. That was why he was amused. "Third, I read a piece of history at home. The 3 tribes of the northern borderline, are the descendants of the Qiangwu tribe of the previous dynasty. They are brave and good at fighting. Each of them is fierce and ferocious. During the chaos of the 16 kingdoms, they burned, killed, and looted. They raped women and used women as food to satisfy their hunger. They even kept young girls in captivity to reproduce. In just a few decades, their population expanded from less than 200,000 to more than 3 million. Feng Jin listened carefully. He knew about this piece of history, but it had nothing to do with the topic, right? Jiang Pingji took a sip of tea to moisten her lips. She continued. The Qiangwu tribe has a large number of elite rattan armored cavalry. The rattan armor is made with a special method by the Qiangwu tribe. It's lighter and more portable than normal armor. It's hard for swords and spears to penetrate it. The rattan armored cavalry is very difficult to deal with. They became their weapon in the northern borderline. In the end, they even wanted to use the power of the rattan armored cavalry to conquer the Central Plains. They wanted to dominate the Central Plains. In a short period of time, no one could stop them. Feng Jin thought about it and said, I've heard of the rattan armored cavalry. In the end, 500,000 rattan armored cavalry were buried in Sichuan Plain. 500,000 was a bit exaggerated, but it was certainly not a small number. That was the history of the end of the 16 Kingdoms chaotic era. 500,000 rattan armored cavalrymen swept through half of the Central Plains. In the end, the prime minister of the Great Xia dynasty, Huangfu Fengmin, set fire to the Sichuan Plains. No one survived. Jiang Pingji suddenly smiled. If I were Master Yuanjing, I wouldn't say anything else. I'll just say one thing. Do you remember the fire in Sichuan Plain that destroyed our ancestors' wild hopes of conquering the Central Plains? Feng Jin was stunned for a while. He said, Did the 3 tribes of the northern borderline rebuild the rattan armored cavalry? Feng Jin thought about how scary the rattan armored cavalry was in the history books. He felt like his scalp was going to explode. Although the northern borderline was not a good place, it was rich in high-quality horses. It was not difficult to build a surprise army. Dongqing's terrain was flat. If the rattan armored cavalry broke through the northern borderline's defense line and entered the hinterland of Dongqing, it would be impossible to stop them. Jiang Pingji shook her head. She recalled the warriors of the northern borderline. Their armor was strange. She could not figure out what the problem was. She went back and flipped through the books that Cheng Cheng had collected. When she saw the history of Sichuan Plain, she remembered. Jiang Pingji said, The rattan armored cavalry's weakness is too obvious. The Qiangwu tribe fell because of it. How could the 3 tribes of the northern borderline be so stupid? In fact, according to Jiang Pingji's observation that night, the rattan armor that the 3 tribes of the northern borderline created did not seem to be very afraid of fire. If Master Yuanjing did that, it would at most be a warning to them. You're too young to play games with me. Feng Jin was speechless. Chapter 285. Feng Jin had always thought of himself as the son of an aristocratic family with a good upbringing. He would not do anything rude under normal circumstances. Until he met Jiang Pingji. He coughed until his cheeks turned red. He awkwardly tidied up the messy crime scene in front of him. He looked a little embarrassed. Lanting, Master Yuanjing is the respected headmaster of the world. How can you? At this point, Feng Jin really couldn't say anything. He realized that he couldn't find the right words in his mind. Jiang Pingji pouted and said, It's just a joke. I'm just saying it in a different way. I'm not trying to slander him. Why are you being so old-fashioned? Maybe if I said this to Master Yuanjing, he would agree with me. Feng Jin sighed. When it came to reasoning, he really couldn't win against the person in front of him. Master Yuanjing is broad-minded. He will not argue with a junior like you, Feng Jin said. Because of the severe injury on his hand, he would not be able to write for a while. Unfortunately, he missed the opportunity to participate in the assessment. Therefore, he had been very free recently. Jiang Pingji would ask him to play chess or chat to kill time. She did not want him to think too much. No matter if one was from a poor family or a gentry family, everyone studied hard for many years to rise to the top. Feng Jin did not show it on his face, but he was definitely not that carefree. Feng Jin knew Jiang Pingji's good intentions. What are you doing? After a game, Jiang Pingji asked Takshu to prepare a table in the courtyard. A big stack of bamboo paper lay on it. Writing from memory. I have nothing to do anyway. Your mind is not on the board when I play chess with you. It's boring. Jiang Pingji knelt on a bamboo chair. Takshu lifted her sleeves slightly and helped her grind the ink. Feng Jin felt a little awkward when Jiang Pingji saw through his absent-minded state. He quickly calmed himself down and changed the topic. Writing from memory? The task that Uncle Lu gave you? As the general evaluation officer, Lu Shi went to the examination hall early to prepare. To avoid suspicion, he would not come back before the assessment ended. Feng Jin thought that since Lu Shi valued Jiang Pingji so much, he would definitely focus on her studies. It was normal for him to give her some homework. Jiang Pingji said, "No, I'm writing from memory Master Cheng's book collection." Mr. Cheng referred to Cheng Cheng. Previously she had made a deal with Cheng Cheng. She provided the best bamboo paper, and Cheng Cheng would make a copy of his book collection for her. However, Cheng Cheng had collected so many books, more than tens of thousands of scrolls. It would take at least 1 or 2 years for him to finish copying. It wasn't that Jiang Pingji couldn't wait that long, but she was free now and could do things better. The more she immersed herself in this era, the more Jiang Pingji saw and understood. It was true that there were too many things in the ancient era that made her unhappy, such as the backward technology, the widespread illiteracy, the barbaric customs, the sexism. But it could not be denied that this era also had its brilliant aspects, such as the accumulated wisdom of the predecessors. She flipped through many books on the art of war, and found that many of the concepts in them were very similar to what she had learned. Some seemed superficial, but the essence was very similar. It should be known that her previous era, and this ancient era, were separated by at least 10 to 20,000 years. Jiang Pingji slowly withdrew the contempt in her heart, and changed her attitude. She studied and studied seriously. If not, she wouldn't have spent so much effort to get Cheng Cheng's book collection. At the beginning of man, his nature is good. His nature is similar, but his habits are different. If he does not teach, his nature will change. Feng Jin sat at the side and watched her write these sentences. He thought about it carefully, but there seemed to be no familiar memory. However, the sentences were short and concise, and there was a profound truth hidden in them. His eyes lit up and he asked, "Who wrote this?" "It's simple and easy to remember. It's interesting." As soon as Feng Jin asked, a bunch of bullet screens floated across the virtual screen. Lao Siji Lianmeng. Young Feng Jin. This is the content of the 3-character classic. It's an enlightening textbook in ancient China. Yinyuejia Zhuge. The 3-character classic was written by Wang Yinglin in the Song dynasty. Even if I told you, you wouldn't know who Wang Yinglin is. Xingleodi Dai. I checked on Baidu. The author of the 3-character classic is Wang Yinglin. Nongfu Shangquan Yudiangshuan. Wang Yinglin in the Song dynasty. But young Feng Jin's dimension doesn't have a Song dynasty, right? In fact, according to the analysis of some gurus, the era that the streamer was in was similar to the Wei Jin dynasty. Apart from the answer, there were other bullet screens that said, "Not teaching is the father's fault. Not teaching is the teacher's laziness." The content was messy and varied. If Jiang Pingji didn't have a strong memory, she would have been confused. Facing Feng Jin's question, Jiang Pingji looked down and glanced at the bullet screen when he wasn't paying attention. She continued writing. "I don't know. The characters in the book can't be studied anymore. I just thought it was interesting, so I copied it." There was something wrong with the stream that day. It was as lively as a festival. When Jiang Pingji said that she wanted to copy some enlightening books and asked if they had any suggestions, the audience in the streaming room went wild. They didn't know about ancient classics, but Baidu definitely did. They could pretend to be a great scholar in front of the streamer with just a search. So Jiang Pingji wrote the 3-character classic on the first page. On the author's side, she wrote anonymous. She didn't write the original author, because she didn't want people to find out who the legendary Wang Yinglin was. So how did she know who Wang Yinglin was? Feng Jin didn't find Jiang Pingji's answer strange. Cheng Cheng's big boxes were too many. He also took a look at them from afar. The books were neatly arranged, which showed the owner's care. But many of the ancient books were incomplete, so it was impossible to find out who the author was. Mencius's mother chose a neighbor. Is this about Mencius's mother moving 3 times? Feng Jin stared at it without blinking. Many of the short and concise sentences came from the classic stories that people were familiar with. Every scholar knew about the story of Mencius's mother moving 3 times, but it was unheard of to summarize it in just 6 words. Faintly, Feng Jin felt something strange flash in his heart, but it disappeared too quickly. He didn't catch the feeling. Jiang Pingji frowned and complained, "You're disturbing me." Feng Jin frowned and stayed silent. Then he sat down obediently. "Good, it's much quieter now." Jiang Pingji continued to copy. The audience in the streaming room also helped her find all kinds of annotations. But they didn't copy and paste from the same webpage, so the content was very messy. She could only delete and edit, which wasted a few pieces of bamboo paper. Some audience enthusiastically helped Jiang Pingji, but naturally, there were also audience members who were watching the show and complaining. Chapter 286. Doraemon. At least the host didn't say that the 3-character classic was written by her. The author's name is anonymous. Xiao Wanzi's Wanzi. In fact, I think the streamer's way of doing things is smart. After all, in ancient times, scholars despised each other. If you really want to convince the other party, you need to have excellent skills and literary self-restraint. If you rely on plagiarism alone, the possibility of exposing yourself is too high. In fact, there were quite a number of viewers who urged Jiang Pingji to write her name on the book. After all, the 3-character classic was an enlightening book. If it were to be popularized in the future, almost every child would be exposed to it first. Her name would be immortalized for generations to come. However, her answer made the audience feel awkward. Host V. According to the federal law on the protection of original literature, the crime of plagiarism is very serious. The minimum sentence is 3 years, and the maximum sentence is life. Even if you're not sued by the original creator, 90% of the profits will belong to the original creator, and you'll have to pay a high amount of psychological damages. Apart from this reason, Jiang Pingji had another more important reason. Her gaze was fixed on the distant future, not the petty gains in front of her. The 3-character classic given by the audience in the streaming room was very short. It did not take Jiang Pingji long to finish copying it. She asked Takshu to dry it with an incense burner. Feng Jin had nothing to do, so he sorted the dried papers according to their contents and bound them into a booklet. Compared to the books he had read before, this short 3-character classic was very shallow, but easy to understand. Sigh, with the chaos of the 16 kingdoms, who knows how many treasures have been lost and their inheritance broken. Feng Jin read the 3-character classic over and over again. As smart as he was, he vaguely knew the true purpose of this book. Because of Jiang Pingji's misdirection, he had already determined that this was the only copy that had been lost during the chaotic times of the 16 kingdoms. He did not know where Cheng Cheng had found it from. It was already difficult enough to maintain a relatively complete content, so he did not dwell on the question of who the author was. Because of this, Feng Jin admired Cheng Cheng's persistence even more. In his opinion, that was the true strength of a scholar, and not the mutual deceit and intrigue of the court. Jiang Pingji listened and casually said, "They are all unique copies. Once they are destroyed, or the people who know the contents are gone, the future generations will never be able to read the contents. If we can expand the scope and everyone has a copy, or if more people read it, it will be easier to pass it on. If an era wanted to progress, books could not only belong to one family or a small group of people." It just so happened that the current situation was that many precious, unique copies were in the hands of one or a few landowning households that had existed for a long time. If these landowning households met with misfortune, the unique copies might be lost or completely disappear, and the inheritance would be severed. There were many reasons for this phenomenon, but in Jiang Pingji's opinion, there were 2 main reasons. Firstly, the technique of papermaking had not yet matured. The bamboo slips were heavy, and the paper was light. In other words, the technological productivity of society was insufficient, causing the cost of studying to be too high, and ordinary people could not afford it. If they couldn't even afford to eat, who would have extra money to study? Secondly, the monopoly of the special class on the inheritance of knowledge systems. The former was still manageable, but the latter was too difficult. If he wanted to break the current system of passing on knowledge and popularize education, it was inevitable that he would come into conflict with these aristocratic families that monopolized knowledge. Just by thinking about it, she could guess how great the pressure was. However, the road was made by people. As long as one had the heart, there was nothing in this world that was impossible. Feng Jin did not reply, but the way he looked at Jiang Pingji was different. Jiang Pingji noticed this detail, but she did not care. She continued to deal with the various annotations that gave her a headache. At that moment, she especially missed the virtual network and the powerful AI system. She had everything she wanted. Why would she need to copy it by hand? System, are you dead? She was multitasking. She read the bullet screen, copied the book, and typed on the system. The system snorted. I'm already dead. If there's something, burn incense. If there's nothing, visit the grave. Jiang Pingji secretly clicked her tongue. She ignored it for a while, but the system's temper was getting worse. Can't you copy the contents of the bullet screen? You see how hard it is for me to copy it by hand. Can you at least be considerate? The system said coldly, I'm sorry, host. Your streaming level is not high enough. You don't have the authority to do so. You have to be at least level 3. Jiang Pingji secretly glanced at the popularity points backstage and frowned slightly. Her accumulated popularity points had long exceeded the 1,000,000 mark. This number was just enough to upgrade a level 2 streamer to level 3. But if she did that, her popularity points would be used up. If she did that, it would undoubtedly put her in a position where she would be held back. The system had been coveting the points for a long time. It had tried to tempt her to spend them, but Jiang Pingji was not tempted. Thinking about that, she directly suppressed the idea of upgrading her level. She deliberately kept the system in suspense. After a long time, she said, Oh, then I'll just copy it by hand. I'll treat it as practicing my calligraphy. The system. Oh, was she deliberately teasing it? In order not to arouse Feng Jin's suspicion, Jiang Pingji not only copied the 3-character classic in the annotations, but also wrote down from memory a few volumes of military books that Cheng Cheng had memorized. Coincidentally, Feng Jin's family also had such a book collection, but a very important half was missing. When he saw Jiang Pingji's complete copy, he immediately loved it and carefully read the missing contents. Mr. Cheng is really a wonderful person. Feng Jin sighed from the bottom of his heart, as if he had obtained a treasure. My father loved this book. He often lamented that he could not see the whole book in his lifetime. He searched all the houses, but could not collect it completely. I didn't expect that I would be able to see the whole book. Time passed quickly as Jiang Pingji copied and wrote. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the assessment. The assessment was the current selection system of Dongqing. It was similar to the 9-rank system that the audience was more familiar with, but there was a big difference between the two. The assessment was conducted every 3 years. The top 3 categories were family background, morality, and knowledge, while the bottom 3 were appearance, ability, and temperament. Family background was needless to say. It depended on one's father, mother, and ancestors. It was better to reincarnate than to learn well. Morality belonged to the category where one could cheat and get a good score by bribing the assessment officer. Knowledge, the general assessment officer would set the question and answer within a time limit. Appearance, in short, was based on the face and the way they dressed. When the time came, they would see a group of gorgeously dressed sissies. As for ability, this criterion was rather vague. Basically, it was a person writing an ability report and bragging about it. This item was linked to one's knowledge. If one bragged too much, one's knowledge would be rejected by the general evaluation officer, and there was basically no hope for one's ability. Temperament, this category was interesting. It completely depended on the general assessment officer's personal preference. If he liked you, he would give you a score. If he liked you, he would give you a score. If he disliked you, he would have a bad temperament. This was also the category where it was easiest to cheat. Looking at the above 6 categories, the General Assessment Officer played a very important role in it. It was different from the closed examination that the audience in the streaming room knew. The assessment was more like a large-scale royal gathering. As Lu Shi's son, Jiang Pingji naturally received an invitation. Looking at the invitation, Jiang Pingji spat out a sentence after a long time. I have never seen such a childish assessment. Chapter 287. Jiang Pingji, General of the Federation, female, former commander of the 7th Corps. Why was there a prefix of former? Because she had died in battle. However, the person who clearly remembered that she had died in battle had now opened her eyes. Don't let go of me. Go away, bastard. Help. The sound of crying filled her ears, causing her to have a splitting headache. She tried to open her eyes, but found that her vision was dark. She could faintly see figures moving in front of her, and there were also innumerable tragic cries, the sound of clothes being torn, and the sound of evil laughter mixed in. She felt that a long time had passed, but in fact it was only a moment. When a malicious and unfamiliar aura approached, her body had already reacted subconsciously. Ouch! Jiang Pingji had already rolled over and stood up. She formed a claw with her right hand and broke the arm of a strange man. At that moment, she looked around coldly and found herself in a dark and dilapidated woodshed. The surrounding air was dry and suffocating, filled with all kinds of pungent smells. Thick dust floated in the air, which made her sensitive sense of smell suffer. Boss, this bitch. It was a strange language, but the emotions in the words revealed malice and hostility. Hearing this voice, she subconsciously frowned and raised her foot to step on the person whose arm she had broken. She stepped on his face to the ground and twisted it so hard that his whole face was covered with reddish-purple color. Jiang Pingji's eyes darkened. She exerted force on her foot, and with a soft sound, white brain matter mixed with blood burst out from the broken skull. The person was dead as a doornail. The movement in the corner startled the people who had lost their minds. Jiang Pingji looked at them coldly, and anger brewed in her chest. What did she hate the most? One was betrayal, and the other was treachery. Although she didn't know why she, who had died in battle, had woken up, the scene in front of her clearly told her that a group of beasts was bullying and humiliating more than 10 innocent and young girls. Some of them were even lying lifelessly on the ground. Animals! Damn it! When the 2 half-naked men saw this, they spat on the ground and stared at her with evil eyes. It was as if they wanted to see through the layers of clothes on her body and see the undeveloped body. However, when they saw the head that was crushed by her foot, all their charming feelings flew away. Bang bang bang. Jiang Pingji had always believed in the principle of using one's fist rather than one's mouth. The men in the room had obviously been branded as prisoners on death row by her. It was obvious that she had nothing to say to a few dead people. Her figure flashed, and her fist directly hit the vital point of one of the men's lower abdomen. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Jiang Pingji's current strength was less than 1% of her peak, but it was no problem for her to deal with these small fries. Some of them tried to use the unfamiliar girls as shields, but she took advantage of the gap. She grabbed their hair bun and smashed their heads to the ground. Their heads were split open and they died. The thick blood soon filled the small and dim room. Whoa! After crushing the last person's neck, Jiang Pingji's cold expression loosened for a moment. She looked at the girls who were disheveled and had disheveled skin. Perhaps they were frightened. They huddled in a corner with tears on their faces. It was a very strange scene. She didn't even know what had happened to her. Who are you? She asked, but when the girls heard her, it was a strange pronunciation. They couldn't understand her at all. They've been killed. You're safe. Jiang Pingji didn't like to talk much. Only her subordinates took the initiative to smile at her. She rarely took the initiative to communicate with others. After all, her mouth would offend people whenever she opened it. She could overturn people with a glance. Over time, she had offended many people, so she was too lazy to speak. Seeing the horror in the girls' eyes, as if they had seen a ghost, Jiang Pingji was silent. It seemed like there was a language barrier. She tried to switch to a few interstellar languages that she was familiar with, and spoke them one by one. Not only did the negative emotions in the girl's eyes not calm, but they became more intense. While communication failed, Jiang Pingji shrugged helplessly. Her head hurt. Just when she didn't know what to do, there was a noise outside the house. Then the door was kicked open. The accomplices of those bastards? Although this body wasn't her own, its quality was still affected. Her night vision was barely passable. The people who kicked open the door were a group of shirtless men who reeked of alcohol. They were dressed very strangely, and they spoke in a strange language. But it didn't matter. Even if Jiang Pingji couldn't understand them, she could distinguish the emotions conveyed in their words. They were all vile, malicious, and full of hostility and murderous intent. Before the bandits could react, Jiang Pingji had already stepped forward to harvest their heads without saying anything. Although her current body was very weak, she had the aura of a person who could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. Almost every time she attacked, she could kill someone. Soon, the inside and outside of the house were filled with corpses, and each of the corpses had died a rather gruesome death. Turning around to look at the frightened girls, Jiang Pingji frowned, but she couldn't leave them alone. "You're safe. I won't let them hurt you." She squatted down and looked at the girls who were curled up. She tried to convey her kindness, but it didn't work. Unless it was something special, Jiang Pingji's patience had always been lacking. She could completely feel the girls' fearful gazes, as if they were looking at a monster, and their feelings of rejection. She was suddenly furious, but she could not vent her anger on a group of weaklings. She and those men seemed to be the source of the girls' fear. They kept wandering in front of them, and couldn't communicate at all. "Forget it. Let them calm down," Jiang Pingji murmured. She got up and left the small wooden house, under the gaze of the noble girls. She didn't go far. She just cleaned up the rest of the bandits' village, and then found a tree nearby to lie down and keep watch for them. After dealing with the panic, Jiang Pingji had time to think about the strange things that happened to her. First of all, this body wasn't hers. It was too weak. It was a compliment. If it had been her in the past, she could have easily penetrated the opponent's front and back with one punch, not just shattering the opponent's internal organs. Secondly, this body was still very short. Maybe it was a dwarf. Why did she make such a judgment? Because she found that her sight was too low. She estimated that it was less than 1.5 meters above sea level. Until midnight, the girls in the house seemed to calm down. Jiang Pingji planned to communicate with them again, but the girls screamed in fear when they saw her. Some even threw things at her. Although she wasn't hurt, it still annoyed Jiang Pingji. "I can't communicate at all." Jiang Pingji dodged the debris and returned to the tree where she had been hiding. She kept her eyes open and watched the night. Although the girls were hostile to her, most of them were frightened. They were probably frightened. She was the leader of the army. She would not be calculative with the weak. After one night, the next dawn came. When the sun was high in the sky, some strange figures appeared at the foot of the mountain in the distance. Those people seemed to be looking for the girls. Jiang Pingji looked at them from afar, and then jumped into the forest. She wanted to find out what the hell this place was. If he had not swallowed the tea, he would have choked and spat it out. "Lanting, you are really..." "I'm just telling the truth. They are much more ostentatious than the courtesan parading through the streets," Jiang Pingji said with a smile. Her eyes were like a pair of crescent moons. "I thought it was a pity that you missed the assessment because of your hand injury. But when I think of you sitting in a red silk carriage like them, dressed gorgeously, wearing pink, red, and green clothes, I can't bear to look straight at you." The weather had completely turned cold, but that did not stop the people's passion for dressing up. Their clothes were mostly bright colors like lotus root pink, water green, lake green, dark blue, spring green, willow yellow, and scarlet. The lapels of their clothes were slightly loose, revealing some of their collarbones. Their hair was tied up with a jade crown and decorated with delicate silk flowers or blooming red plum branches. Their faces were covered with a thick layer of snow-white powder that was as white as a limestone wall. Their lips were mostly painted with bright red lipstick, giving people goosebumps all over their bodies. She could not understand the aesthetics of the people in ancient times. The people who were ugly to her were as beautiful as fairies in the eyes of the people downstairs. Jiang Pingji took a deep breath. She had to admit that the Langjuns were indeed very good-looking, but their makeup skills were too destructive. Jiang Pingji could not help but wonder if the poor kids had offended the stylist. Bah! Where did the stylist come from in this era? Feng Jin looked at Jiang Pingji helplessly. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. This is the fashion in Shangjing. The gentry's sons are after it. It doesn't matter if it's 100 people or 1,000,000 people. Ugly is ugly. The so-called beauty does not mean putting all the good things on your head. If that's the case, it's better to look at a vase. Jiang Pingji pouted, which made Feng Jin speechless. Feng Jin coughed and said, "Lanting is still young. You will understand when you grow up." Jiang Pingji glanced at Feng Jin, which made him feel uncomfortable. "If you think that's beautiful, why don't I see you wearing makeup?" Jiang Pingji looked at him from head to toe. He was wearing a green scholar's robe with layers and wide sleeves. His black hair was tied up neatly with a simple and natural crown. He looked refreshing. Feng Jin's fingers paused. He shook his head and suddenly said, "I'm born beautiful. I don't need any accessories." Jiang Pingji was speechless. Young Feng Jin, even if you're narcissistic, you're still so elegant and refined. Jiang Pingji was bored to death. She supported the window with one hand. The red silk carriages passed by the tea house one after another. The people seemed to have turned into star chasers. They stared at the Langjuns. Many girls even took off the sachets on their waists and threw them at the carriages when they saw the men they liked. Perhaps they were used to it, but many viewers in the streaming room seemed to be able to accept it. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Suddenly, there was a Mimi who felt sorry for the audience's aesthetics. Had it been destroyed? Just as she was about to doze off, the bullet screen in the streaming room suddenly surged out like a blowout. It almost covered every inch of the virtual screen. Jiang Pingji frowned. She didn't understand what these people who were obsessed with looks had taken the wrong medicine this time. Zayokwenkikiyuo. I saw my husband. He's so handsome. Yasubi Sangwashan. I feel like my eyes are healed. It's great, oh, greater than over equal to V. Oh, Lao Ciji Lianmeng. I heard the sound of flowers blooming. Zhang Qingwai Jishui. Mama asked me why the screen of my phone is wet. I haven't licked it enough. Sans Hisong Shiningsher. It's blown out. The ascetic Adonis seems to have torn his clothes. She turned her head to look downstairs. She heard Feng Jin's laughter. This Lang Jun looks unfamiliar. Which family are you from? The man was wearing a dark blue robe with wide sleeves. The dark color did not make him look old. Instead, it made his snow-white skin look even more beautiful. His face was like jade. His hair was like splashes of ink. His lips were red without lipstick, and his eyebrows were green without any makeup. Unlike other people who looked at the people and smiled, he was sitting still. He closed his eyes and seemed to be deep in thought. His eyebrows were slightly furrowed. With her excellent eyesight, Jiang Pingji could even see his slender eyelashes. Chapter 289. Jiang Pingji suddenly smiled. She felt a little evil in her heart. She untied the perfume pouch on her waist and accurately threw it into the carriage. Feng Jin was stunned, but Jiang Pingji moved too fast for him to stop her. Feng Jin was not the only one who was shocked by her. Wei Ci, who was silently reciting the mind-clearing formula in the horse carriage, felt something strange in his arms. He could not help but open his eyes and saw a delicate yellow sachet. Although it was made for a man, it looked very similar to a woman's and looked somewhat familiar. He picked it up. There was a small she embroidered on the corner. His heart tightened and his pupils shrank. He suddenly turned his head to look out of the car. With just a glance, he discovered a familiar figure leaning against the window, revealing a somewhat evil smile at him. Wei Ci turned his face expressionlessly. He clenched his teeth and held the sachet tightly in his right hand. He curled the sachet into a ball until his knuckles turned white and blue. His chest was in turmoil. Jiang Pingji laughed. Her eyes flashed with interest. Lanting, are you interested in that Lang Jun? Feng Jin watched Jiang Pingji's sachet fall into the strange Longjuan's carriage. He could not stop her. Why do you say that? Jiang Pingji turned to look at Feng Jin and said, I just feel that he is pure and not pretentious. He is very different from other coquettish bitches. Didn't Huayu notice? That woman is as beautiful as Huayu. Feng Jin was speechless. Suddenly, he could not look at the term natural beauty in the eye. He took a deep breath and said, Lanting playing around is one thing. How can you give a sachet to an outsider? Don't worry. I know that Lang Jun. I was just joking. He won't mind. I was just scaring him. Even if Wei Si did mind, he would not have the guts to say it. She was very sure that she had never met Wei Si before she came to Shangjing, but he seemed to have a good understanding of her. He could even be considered to be familiar with her. Not familiar with Lu Shi, but familiar with Jiang Pingji. That was interesting. She could not help but want to tease him. She saw others throw handkerchiefs and sachets, so she did the same. Jiang Pingji smiled and took a sip of tea. Feng Jin looked at her and felt tired. The people in the carriage after Wei Si were all acquaintances, whom she had met once or twice. Unlike the Langjuns who grew up in Shangjing, the Langjuns in Shangjing were used to dressing up luxuriously. There was a sense of decadence in their extravagance. Master Yuanjing was a decent teacher, and the disciples he taught were decent as well. They did not dress as nobly as Shangjing Gizi. Instead, they looked more like scholars. More importantly, compared to those coquettish cheese, these people were more in line with the aesthetics of the livestream viewers. Every time a carriage passed by, the viewers in the live broadcast room would howl for a long time, wishing they could crawl over to hug and kiss the carriage. Zhang Qingwai Jimisiju. I really want to cross over. That way, I can hug the streamer's thigh and look at beauties. Maybe I can become a fair, rich, and beautiful woman with the help of Tang poems, song lyrics, and Yuan songs. I can marry a tall, rich, and handsome man and reach the pinnacle of my life. Sangui Liangzhu light wine. #despise. Transmigrating? Look at your own face first. In ancient times, people were obsessed with beautiful faces. Even if you were the reincarnation of Li Bai and Du Fu, you would not be able to change your fate if you did not have a beautiful face, let alone Tang poems and song lyrics. Zhang Qingwai Jimisiju. #clutching my chest and vomiting blood. Sob, the person above me. You are such a blow to my confidence. The red silk carriages drove into the royal garden one by one. As soon as they got close, a strong fragrance of flowers floated over the high courtyard wall and went straight to the tip of their noses. Wei Si bent over and got out of the carriage. He had regained his composure. He did not know where the light yellow sachet went. Han Yu asked knowingly, Zixiao, I seem to have seen someone throw a sachet into your carriage. Who is so bold to do that? Wei Si looked indifferent and said, just a naughty and rude person. Maybe it was because of the ordeal that Han Yu had gone through. He looked more mature than before, but his eyes were still bright and cheerful. If it were not for the inappropriate occasion, he would drag Wei Si aside and interrogate him. Don't let Lu County Chief hear what you said. Otherwise, Zixiao will not pass the assessment this year, Han Yu said. Wei Si still looked indifferent. The noblemen who were able to make it to this stage were basically selected from all over Dongqing. They were considered the elite talents of this generation. If there were no special circumstances, they would be able to pass the assessment. It was just that there were differences in rankings. If Wei Si, with the title of Master Yuanjing's disciple, got the last place, it would not only be a disgrace for him, but it would also ruin Master Yuanjing's reputation. As far as he could remember, this was the first time that Wei Si participated in the assessment. When he was parading on the street, the bustling scene made him feel like time and space were disordered. He only woke up from the memory when he saw the small sachet thrown into the carriage by the malicious owner. I don't know what kind of questions Lu County Chief will give. Master said that the future is unpredictable. He asked us to wait and see and deal with it randomly. Han Yu sighed. With Master Yuanjing's ability, he could more or less see some clues, but he did not disclose it to his students. Wei Si listened with a cold face. If the situation had not changed, he would have known the questions for this year's assessment. However, It was a pity that the person who came up with the questions was not the current General Evaluation Officer, Lu Shi, who knew what questions he would come up with. It is not difficult to guess according to Lu County Chief's personality. Lu Zheng and Cheng Jing were talking in a low voice. Hearing their conversation, Lu Zheng lowered his voice and said, "You can guess." Han Yu looked at Lu Zheng with a smile. Master Yuanjing once said that Lu County Chief is a pragmatic person. The questions are mostly related to the way of governance, Lu Zheng guessed. Most of the previous assessments were about poems and couplets. A group of people were there to mourn the changing seasons or sing praises. According to the rumors, Lu Shi was more pragmatic. The assessment was to select suitable young talents for Dongqing, not to select flattering followers. Lu Shi should be different from the previous general evaluation officers. Not to mention other things, the other Langzhens tried every means to find out Lu Shi's preferences. Even their outfits were much thinner. Yes, if it was not to cater to Lu Shi's preferences, Jiang Pingji and the audience in the streaming room would have seen a more gorgeous parade. Wei Xi did not participate in this topic. He just listened quietly. Han Yu asked him, "Zixiao, you are most concerned about these things. Don't you have any opinions?" He lowered his eyes and said, "If it was not for my master's request, I really did not want to come here. I don't care what questions Lu County Chief asks. As long as he was not at the bottom, it was more or less acceptable. Yes, he was just there to go through the motions. According to the current selection standards of Dongqing, even if Wei Xi was full of talents, he would not be appointed." Han Yu seemed to have thought of something. He sighed and did not insist. On the other side, Jiang Pingji and Feng Jin also arrived at the royal manor. A fragrant wind assaulted them. Although it was late autumn, the royal manor was still filled with flowers. The unknown trees were decorated with bright red flowers. That was where the strong fragrance came from. Chapter 290. Although the royal garden was luxurious, it couldn't compare to the flowers that were blooming all over the mountain. People were dancing under the trees. Young Langzhens dressed in red and green, with makeup and flowers on their hair, walked among them. They took their seats one by one. At a glance, they were even more beautiful than the blooming flowers. Lu Shi wore a snow-green robe and a lacquered gauze crown. He held a rui in his hand. He sat upright with a cold expression on his face. He was already over 30 years old, but he didn't look any worse than those young men. He had a maturity and steadiness that they didn't have. He looked coldly at the Langzhens who came together. Some were smiling, some were frowning, and some were nodding slightly at him. There were hundreds of different expressions, and all of them were romantic. Only the obscure fawning was the same. They were like peacocks spreading their feathers, and they couldn't wait to show off their most magnificent side. Time passed and his eyes drifted. He seemed to have returned to decades ago, when he was one of those nobles. However, he always remembered that he looked calm and composed at that time. He played the zither, talked about poems and commented on calligraphy and paintings, but he was actually sweating profusely. It was as if his heart was being threatened by an invisible hand. If he was not careful, it would be squeezed tightly. He was anxious and panicked. When the assessment was over, he went home in a panic and poured out his uneasiness and timidity to Amin. Amin stared at him with hidden bitterness. To this day, he still remembered Amin's angry complaints. "How pretentious, what kind of test is this?" Lu Shi was confused. "Chief Lu, all the Langzhens have taken their seats. We can begin." While he was thinking, his colleague beside him carefully woke him up. Lu Shi opened his slightly tipsy eyes, as if he had just had a good sleep. Looking at the nobles who were more beautiful than the scenery, Lu Shi smiled and said, "Let's start over there." The assessment in Dongqing took place every 3 years. The information about the family background, in the top 3 categories, had long been sent to Shangjing from other places. Lu Shi arrived in Shangjing a little late. He had spent the past few days on this. He read through the information of all the candidates for the assessment and ranked them according to their family background, status, and identity in their families. He gave them the corresponding scores. They were roughly categorized as superior, medium, and inferior. Although there were only about 100 people participating in the assessment, They were all carefully selected from all over Dongqing. Each of them had a strong family background and could not afford to offend any of them. If there was a huge dispute over the ranking, Lu Shi would have offended their backer. As mentioned before, morality, appearance, and temperament could be used to bribe the examiners. Lu Shi had received a lot of bribes and benefits in the past few days, whether it was real money or antiques. Those people's generosity had left Lu Shi speechless and widened his horizons. No wonder everyone wanted to be a general evaluation officer. Even if they didn't start their business for 3 years, once they started their business, they would be able to make a living for 30 years. Ability, which was the ability to boast, had already been submitted to him. Lu Shi had also seen all of them. Most of them were flashy and boastful. Why did they say that it was flashy but without substance? Take a chestnut for example. A person with a thin waist, who took 5 distilled powder all day, which caused his skin to be too delicate. He could only wear soft old clothes, and couldn't even take a shower. Yet he could draw a bow that could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and fight 2 tigers alone. Wasn't that funny? Oh, maybe it was the kind of tigress that sweated the silk clothes, and knocked the jade pillow with a golden hairpin? Lu Shi inadvertently became an experienced driver, and drove a car in an artistic manner. It was called an assessment, but it was more like a large-scale gathering with a purpose. All the Langjuns were showing off their talents. Those who dared to show off their talents all had something up their sleeves. Lu Shi had thought it was boring at first, but now he was more into it. The atmosphere was very harmonious. As mentioned before, the assessment was more like a large-scale gathering of the royal family. Those who participated were not only the nobles, but also many important ministers and their families. The emperor, his concubines, princes, and concubines would all be there. Although there were many people, it didn't seem noisy. Lu Shi didn't remember such a scene. How would Jiang Pingji, who was a future general, know how to deal with it? Fortunately, as the legitimate son of the Feng family, Feng Jin had been through all kinds of big events since he was a child. He could still talk and smile with others with Jiang Pingji, who was a burden. He was like a butterfly flying through flowers. He greeted and talked to everyone he met, and didn't forget to introduce Jiang Pingji to them. They were all a group of wily old foxes. Even if they hadn't heard of Jiang Pingji before, they didn't dare to ignore her just because she was the son of Lu County Chief. Jiang Pingji followed Feng Jin, and did know many people. Lanting, you don't like to talk to people? Feng Jin sat down in his seat according to his status. He tilted his head and asked her. Jiang Pingji sighed and said, "No, I just feel that the circle of nobles is really messy." Feng Jin was dumbfounded. The circle of nobles was really messy? He could recognize the 4 words separately, but he couldn't understand them when they were put together. However, as smart as he was, he could figure it out just by looking at the literal meaning. Why do you say that? Feng Jin couldn't help but laugh. He was not prepared for Jiang Pingji's shocking words, so he moved closer to her and lowered his voice. Nowadays, men are actually so popular? Even if she came from the future world, which was abnormally open, not everyone was gay. However, after meeting so many people with Feng Jin, she sincerely suspected that she had entered a world of pornography. She even had an illusion that she was probably the only straight man in the world. Bah, she was a woman. Feng Jin's snow-white skin was dyed a little red. He said uncomfortably, "Can your eyes not look around?" Jiang Pingji clicked her tongue. "Are you asking me to close my eyes and not look?" When she saw the other party, her brain would automatically think and analyze. Could she be blamed for that? It was a professional habit that she had developed over the years. It wasn't something that she could change, even if she wanted to. Feng Jin choked and had a strange expression on his face, but he still added in a low voice, "The relationship in the court is messy. As long as it doesn't affect the continuation of the family line, it's very common to become brothers." Many sworn brothers would even buy betrothal gifts for the other half, so that the other half could get married and have children to continue the family line. After all, there were 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants was the worst. Longyang's division of peaches was already against the family line. If one of them died because of this, how could he face his ancestors 100 years later? Jiang Pingji squinted her eyes, which made Feng Jin feel uneasy. There was always an indescribable feeling in his heart. I'm not interested in this kind of hobby. Lanting, you don't have to look at me like this. It's weird. It was usually fine, but when Jiang Pingji stared at him seriously, Feng Jin always had the strange illusion that his whole body was being seen through. Jiang Pingji giggled and said to him, "Why you as upright and upright? Why are you afraid of me?" "I'm not afraid. I just don't like it." Feng Jin said helplessly, "Sit properly. If others see you like this, they will most likely blame County Chief Liu for not raising you well." Suddenly, he remembered something and reminded her. "Lanting, remember not to run around. The royal villa is not like your own home. Every move of yours is being watched. Don't talk and don't do anything. Just be quiet, okay?" Chapter 291. Jiang Pingji's words could not be trusted, including the punctuation. Although Jiang Pingji had never participated in a large-scale party in the ancient times, she had participated in one in the previous era. As the most powerful military leader in the Federation, she had people supporting her wherever she went. For important banquets of the Federation, the organizers would habitually send her an invitation. Whether she would attend or not depended on her mood. After comparing the parties in the two eras, she realized that regardless of whether it was the ancient times or her era, it was nothing more than the same routine. However, as the commander of the army, she was treated with respect and had to submit to others. Now she was just a shrimp. Her ears listened to the moving music, and her eyes watched the graceful dance. Jiang Pingji smiled faintly. Being invisible had its advantages. At least she did not have to deliberately remember who someone was. She did not have to think about someone's family background and other human relationships. Then, she had to think about how she should talk to the person. It was so tiring to even talk. She was so bored. It's hard for you to watch so intently. Are their dances that good? Jiang Pingji glanced at the bullet screen. The audience's comments were focused on the dancers' bodies, faces, and skin. As for the dance moves, they all felt that it was too slow. It felt like an old man or an old woman practicing Tai Chi in the park. It was not as good as the square dance. Although she did not know what Tai Chi was or what square dance was, judging from the bullet screen, it should not be easy to describe. The body turns and waves the sleeves lightly. The eyebrows are furrowed. Feng Jin looked at the dancers who were dancing gracefully. He clapped his hands and smiled without turning his head. Waist like a willow, voice like an oriole. This feeling needs to be savored carefully. Lanting is impatient. You should calm down. Jiang Pingji was dumbfounded. She looked at Feng Jin, who was engrossed in watching, then at the dancers, and then at the audience in the streaming room. Suddenly, she felt that the audience in the streaming room and her aesthetic standards were in the same dimension. Feng Jin was already a god. The dance moves are pretty good, but I prefer the enchanting ones. Fair skin, long legs, big breasts, and perky buttocks. The audience in the streaming room unanimously agreed with what she said. Zhang Chenghua Jishui. I like such honest and sincere streamers. Pai Hai was show. Actually, I like hot bodies too. I only pay attention to hot female streamers. I don't watch those without bodies. The streamer is the only one who doesn't rely on her body. She relies on her inner qualities to attract me. You are the most special. Shushu takes you to see goldfish. Have a safe journey. #candlestick. The little angel in the streaming room agreed with Jiang Pingji's point of view, but Feng Jin, an orthodox male from ancient times, was not so open-minded. Her snow-white face was dyed red, and it was obvious that she was embarrassed. Vulgar. Feng Jin was Feng. Jiang Pingji understood that a young man like Feng Jin, even if he liked girls with nice skin, he would not say it out loud. She snorted coldly. Why you're lying. How am I vulgar? Feng is Don. I Feng Hua. Dozen. Don Feng. Dozen. Jiang is with Jiang. I Feng colon. Li Jiang Feng Jiang. Feng colon. Jiang. I Jiang. Jiang Pingji misinterpreted his words. Feng Jin was no match for her. He gritted his teeth and said, Lanting, Do you dare to let Chief Lu hear what you said? Jiang Pengji retorted indifferently. Why you? Have you forgotten who I went to the brothel with? Feng Jin. Who else could it be? Your father, Lu Shi. Fine, he lost. No. Feng Jin suddenly remembered that the girl next to him was a girl, not a boy. Thinking of this, his expression became thought-provoking. He looked like he was constipated. Chief Lu, your daughter is like this. Why don't you take care of her? Lu Shi said. What can I do? I'm also desperate. Not to mention going to a brothel. Even if my daughter went to a small restaurant in the south courtyard, I would accompany her. Jiang Pingji looked at the hopeless Feng Jin. She smiled and squinted her eyes. There were all kinds of bad things about the ancient times. But one thing was for sure. The people were conservative. Take Feng Jin for example. No matter how serious he was still a teenager. He was very young. As long as Jiang Pingji put down her pride and put on a do-whatever-you-want attitude, Feng Jin would not be able to do anything to her. Feng Jin drank a lot of wine and looked embarrassed. He asked a maid to lead him to the toilet. Jiang Pingji saw him leave and looked at the empty seat next to her. She raised her eyebrows and stood up. She was quite curious about the royal courtyard of the ancient era. As a qualified streamer, she had to satisfy the audience's needs. Learning from Feng Jin's elegant speech, Jiang Pingji successfully hooked up with a maid in palace attire to lead her away from the banquet. Zine Qingwai Jishui. Granny, I just want to visit the ancient royal garden. I don't want to visit the toilet. If you want to go to the toilet, I don't mind. Jiang Pingji's mouth twitched when she saw the comment. She never thought that the audience in the ancient times would have such hardcore tastes. I wonder if this lady knows where the Langjuns who are participating in the assessment are? I have a few good friends who are in this batch. Looking at the time, the assessment should have started for some time. But I still feel a little anxious in my heart. I wonder if Miss can lead the way for me. The palace maid pursed her lips into a smile. Langjun, you are calling me a slave. The rules of the royal garden are strict. Everyone has their own way. A lowly slave like me is not qualified to go there. If you want to go, I can show you the way. You will see it after passing through the garden. Then I'll have to trouble you. The garden in the imperial garden was not something the Lu Manor's small garden could compare to. The garden was filled with exotic flowers and plants. Even though it was late autumn, the garden was still blooming with beautiful purple and red flowers. The bright colors dispelled the bleakness and made the garden more lively. It was said that the imperial garden in Shangyang Palace was more than 10 times bigger than this one. Usually, only the emperor, the concubines, and the princes and concubines could go there. No one else could get close. Jiang Pingji was not qualified to step into the garden of the royal family, if it was not for the special occasion, let alone walk around casually and admire the beautiful scenery. Jiang Pingji did not even have the right to enter the garden of the royal family. Your Highness, be gentle. Jiang Pingji found a secluded place and prepared to rest on an artificial hill. A member of the audience who studied biology in the streaming room expressed his interest in the unfamiliar plants in the garden and wanted to observe them up close. He asked Jiang Pingji if he could stay in the garden for a while. It would be even better if she could zoom in and let him observe them carefully. She thought that she had nothing to do, so she agreed. However, after she closed her eyes for a while, she heard a coquettish gasp from below, the gasp of a man, and a woman was getting louder and more urgent. Jiang Pingji, who was sitting above, was speechless. The audience in the streaming room was even more direct. Chapter 292. According to Jiang Pingji's 5 senses, she naturally knew that there were 2 people in the mountain stream, under the rockery. However, they were well behaved at the beginning. Maybe they were a couple who had committed to each other and took the opportunity to confess their feelings. She was also very confident in her concealment skills. She was sure that she would not reveal her tracks and scare the couple. She was very pure, but the old driver was skilled in driving. He drove the car so suddenly that it caught her off guard. The couple did not say anything and could not wait to hug each other. They tore off each other's clothes. Not long after, they took off their clothes one by one. They went straight to the third base. Their actions were intense. The pearls and jadeite on the girl's head hit the rockery wall, making a slight knocking sound. Jiang Pingji was stunned on the spot. The audience in the streaming room was clamoring to see the live version. Zhang Qingwai Jimisiju. Ow ow ow, Granny, can you adjust the camera angle of the live stream room? I can only hear the sound but can't see the image. It feels weird. An excellent live stream room should have excellent sound and color. Lao Siji Lianmeng. This car is so unexpected. Even if I'm an old driver, I almost drifted off the curve of the mountain. Jiang Pingji quickly calmed down. She did not agree to the request of the audience in the streaming room, nor did she leave the spot. As a result, the pair of lovebirds, who were secretly looking for an opportunity to have sex in the wild, were completely unaware. They were having fun, and from the sounds, they seemed to be playing different tricks and positions. They were completely unaware that Jiang Pingji was half lying on the path created by the rockery, as well as 10,000 spectators. Jiang Pingji deeply felt that even though she was not the primary student of Grim Reaper that the audience spoke of, and people died wherever she went, she had something in common with that person. It seemed that she could encounter interesting things wherever she went. This time, she even encountered a couple having sex in the wild. Host V. The Dongqing royal family is doomed. The emperor has an affair with the wife of his minister and his father's concubine. The son has an affair with another son's future wife on a day like the assessment. They are not afraid of people coming and going. They are caught red-handed. The audience in the streaming room looked at the bullet screen and was a little confused. Zhang Qingwai Jitue. #despise. Granny, are you secretly watching? Otherwise, how would she know who the couple is? Jiang Pingji secretly rolled her eyes. She did not want to be in the limelight. However, no one in the livestream room could keep up with her brain, so she could only accommodate the other party. Host V. Judging from his voice, the man is Wuma Jun. I've met him a few times, and he will become my brother-in-law. The expressions of the viewers in the live streaming room cracked. F***CK, Wuma Jun. How dare he make a cuckold of the streamer's sister in front of the streamer? Jiang Pingji sent another bullet screen. Host V. The woman is from the northern borderline. Why do you make such a judgment? Because Wuma Jun just ripped off the other party's dress. The sound of fabric tearing is not ordinary silk or satin. This is a special fabric that only a few nobles in the northern borderline can wear. I've read about this in a book called Unofficial History. The author was so bored that he tore different kinds of fabrics and carefully recorded the difference in the tearing sound. Because of the intense movements, the pearls and jade necklaces on the woman's head knocked against the stone wall. The quality of the fabric can also be heard. The woman's clothes were stripped off. The action was so intense that the pearls and jade necklaces were scattered on the ground. Jiang Pingji could figure out how many pieces of jewelry fell on the ground and whether the quality was good or not just by listening to the sound. Combining the above points, she thought about the people from the northern borderline who came to Dongqing recently. Naturally, this identity of his was obvious. Lao Siji Lianmeng. I don't know. Should I say that the streamer has good ears, or that she has seen too many things? She seems to know everything. He was having sex, but she could hear so many things that had nothing to do with the topic. Her face was cold. She felt that she and the streamer were not from the same world. Oh, that's not right. They were not from the same world. Although Jiang Pingji was listening to an overflowing drama at a close distance, her expression remained normal. Her eyes were still clear and bright. She was not affected by the wild mandarin ducks below at all. Some veterans in the streaming room could not help but call for Miss Five Fingers just by listening to the sound. In the eyes of the audience, Jiang Pingji was too cold, but it was normal for her. If a well-trained genetic warrior could not even control his physiological reactions, he would have been kicked out of the ranks of genetic warriors long ago. After about the time it took to burn 2 joss sticks, the wild mandarin ducks below finally stopped. They hugged each other and panted. At that moment, a member of the audience jeered and asked Jiang Pingji. You dialed his phone is switched off. Streamer, you listen to the show for free. Don't you have anything to say? Host V. Trash. Looking at these two short words, many of the veteran audience members revealed a meaningful smile. The pair of wild mandarin ducks below calmed down for a while. Then, there was the sound of them putting on their clothes quietly. Your Fourth Highness, Anyina will remember what happened today deeply. Your Fourth Highness. Haha, it was indeed Wuma Jun. Jiang Pingji sneered as she listened. One was the fourth prince of Dongqing, and the other was the princess of the northern borderline, who was about to become the second princess consort. They came to the rockery on such a special day. They were really too much. What did the fourth prince want to do? Wuma Jun had woken up from what had happened just now, but his voice was still a little hoarse. Are you really going to marry my second brother? He can't give you the honor you deserve, Wuma Jun said disdainfully. The princess of the northern borderline, whose name was Anyina, sighed softly and said, My father wants me to marry your second brother, so I have to marry him. Which woman in the world hasn't gone through life like this? They are all pitiful people who have no choice. I have no regrets since I gave my chastity to you early on. Jiang Pingji pouted. Princess Anyina was also good at acting. She did not even have a draft when she spoke. She boasted as soon as she opened her mouth. Your Fourth Highness, let's accept it. From now on, I'm your second sister-in-law. We don't have to keep in touch secretly anymore. If someone finds out, they will mistakenly think that the northern borderline is disloyal to Dongqing, and that the marriage is just a cover-up. We will be the sinners of both countries. Jiang Pingji had thought that the princess was extraordinary. Now it seemed that she was not as good as her reputation. No, her reputation was not as good as her reputation. At the end of the day, she just wandered between different men and played with power. The northern borderline wanted the princess to sow discord between the second prince and the Count of Jinbei's residence, so that the relationship between the emperor and the prince would be at loggerheads. It would be best if Dongqing would never have a day of peace. Unexpectedly, the princess had already destroyed the relationship between the two princes before she married into the northern borderline. Logically speaking, Wuma Jun was ambitious. Although he was young, he liked to plan before taking action. He was not like a brainless pig. How could he be easily hooked by Princess Anyina and believe in her affectionate performance? She frowned, but she forgot that most men nowadays regarded women as vassals and objects. Who was he referring to as having long hair and short knowledge? Princess Anyina's acting skills were too good, and Wuma Jun was too conceited. Chapter 293. Jiang Pingji did not intend to show herself. Naturally, she would not let others discover her traces. She kept a sneer on her lips as she listened to the man and woman being lovey-dovey to each other. Due to the obstacles of reality, they had to go their separate ways and forget about each other. To be honest, a more active gossiper could write a short story about sadomasochistic love in minutes. Jiang Pingji lifted her eyelids. All kinds of sadomasochistic love stories had popped up in the streaming room. Some experienced players who were proficient in all kinds of romantic plots could accurately guess the conversation between Princess Anyina and Wuma Jun. They echoed each other. It was simply a trap. If it were not for the situation, Jiang Pingji would have laughed out loud. People who thought they were smart were always the stupidest. In a sense, the man and woman below were a perfect match. Jiang Pingji was happy to watch a good show, but the audience in the streaming room did not quite understand. Canteen Daffin Granny, isn't Wuma Jun your sister's future husband? He's cheating on you in front of you. Don't you have any temper? I'm looking forward to your sister complex acting up and beating up Wuma Jun and his little mistress. Not only was the audience looking forward to it, but the entire audience in the streaming room was looking forward to it. They had long been accustomed to Jiang Pingji's unreasonable and protective style. Even if she was a concubine's sister, in ancient times, she would be the daughter of a concubine, or an illegitimate daughter, or a mistress in modern times. However, this was ancient times. Concubines' daughters also had human rights. It was justifiable. They did not think about how Jiang Pingji would fight for justice for the daughter born of a concubine. However, Wuma Jun was having sex with another woman in broad daylight before marrying her. He was a jerk. According to the streamer's temperament, she would definitely come forward and beat him up. Jiang Pingji smiled. After testing Lu Shi and Chongqing Alley, she had basically figured out the identity of the daughter born of a concubine in the manor. In other words, the daughter born of a concubine was not on the same side as the Lu family from the moment she was born. It was impossible for them to be on the same side in the future. As for sibling love or brotherly love, there was no trace of it at all. Lu Shi had taken this into consideration. He had secretly instructed the second wife and Madame Dai to separate Lu Shi from the daughter born of a concubine. They had never interacted with each other before, so naturally, there was no relationship between them. Lu Shi knew that the mistress's daughter had an unusual identity and was most likely on the opposite side. Lu Shi intended to marry the mistress's daughter to Wu Majun. It was obvious that he had dug a trap for the kid to jump into. Under such circumstances, Jiang Pingji still stood up for the mistress's daughter. She had nothing better to do. Host V. You want to mess with Wu Majun and Enyina? Heh. It was only a matter of time. The path that Jiang Pingji wanted to take. These two were stumbling blocks. Perhaps they were small gravel or pebbles. Sooner or later, she had to kick them away. However, the reason couldn't be to vent his anger for a concubine sister who had nothing to do with him. Obviously, the audience in the streaming room liked to join in the fun without using their brains. No one could tell that Jiang Pingji was playing with words. Princess Enyina watched Wu Majun leave the rockery affectionately. She stayed where she was and carefully cleaned up her appearance. Then, she left with a normal expression. Jiang Pingji continued to sit there, unmoving like a mountain. After a few breaths, Enyina, who had already left, returned. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. The princess, who was expected by the royal family of the northern borderline, was quite capable. Enyina didn't notice her, but she was very suspicious. She pretended to walk far away and quietly turned back to take a look. When Enyina's aura was completely gone, Jiang Pingji jumped off the rockery with ease. The ventilation there was smooth. The aura left by the couple's mischief was so weak that it was almost undetectable. However, for Jiang Pingji, whose five senses were different from ordinary people, her nose was filled with a strange smell. She frowned slightly, and there was some disgust and contempt in her eyes. She slightly controlled her five senses, and the nauseating aura became much lighter. She took off another perfume pouch from her waist and sniffed it gently. Only then did she feel better. Wu Majun and Enyina left one after another. Jiang Pingji chose another winding path and left the rockery after making several turns. It was a special day. The garden, which was usually quiet, was more lively. Many noble ladies, who were gorgeously dressed and exquisitely dressed, were touring the garden together. Their eyebrows or foreheads were decorated with delicate red flower ornaments. The bright red color made the skin around them look even fairer and more delicate. The current atmosphere in Dongqing was not too closed. Although men and women touring together would be criticized, it was not a big deal. Therefore, apart from these noble ladies who were more beautiful than flowers, there were many young men in elegant clothes in the garden, beside the waterside pavilion, and in the gazebo. Out of tacit understanding, both parties were clearly separated. Even if they were familiar with each other, they would only look at each other from afar, separated by a small forest or a cluster of flowers. They would quickly look away. The evaluation day was not only related to the future of the noble son's officialdom, but it might also affect their marriage. Jiang Pingji was naturally a noble son, but she was still young. She was still young and small in stature, but her facial features were very distinctive. She was more feminine yet full of heroic spirit. After a few years, when she had completely grown up and gained some scholarly honors and fame, this was the image of a husband in the eyes of many aristocratic ladies. The most important thing was that she had to be handsome. It was not masculine, but a beauty that was mixed with the gentleness of a woman. It was best if her gender was indistinguishable. Not only that, her figure had to be tall and thin, her temperament had to be as gentle as jade, and she had to treat people gently. She had to be knowledgeable and talented. Avoiding the path that the noble ladies took, Jiang Pingji looked around and went to the octagonal pavilion that was on a higher ground. Standing there and looking into the distance, those with better eyesight could see the scholars who were participating in the evaluation. When she went over, there were already 3 unfamiliar men sitting in the octagonal pavilion. Jiang Pingji did not know them, so she just nodded politely. They did not mind Jiang Pingji coming over to disturb them. Instead, they smiled and turned their heads to continue chatting with their friends. The fallen petals were in profusion. The falling petals moved with the wind and covered the ground. Hundreds of scholars were scattered along the riverside and in the small forest. Graceful maids shuttled back and forth while carrying fine wine and delicacies. Occasionally, the sound of elegant music could be heard. Jiang Pingji and the audience in the streaming room were silent. Their expressions were subtle. How could this be called an examination? Oh no, this was an evaluation. Lao Siji Lianmeng. I probably went to a fake school. Shaoxiang Huasher Si Lu Si. I probably met a group of fake teachers. Sans Hisong Shiningsher. I probably did a bunch of fake test papers. Bingtang Lemon Guatang. I probably entered a fake examination hall. Jiang Pingji. Separated by such a distance, others could only see a blurry figure, but it was different for Jiang Pingji. She could see all kinds of people. At that moment, Wei Si's bun was slightly different. He raised his hand and touched it. A blooming beauty's sleep fell on top of his head. The beauty's sleep only bloomed in autumn and winter. The colder it was, the more beautiful it was when it bloomed. Its fragrance assailed one's nostrils. He looked at the flower and was slightly lost in thought. Not knowing what he was recalling, his expression became a little bitter. At that moment, he seemed to have sensed someone's gaze. He quietly looked over. Even though he could only see a blurry figure, how could he not recognize it? Chapter 294. Although Dongqing's aristocratic families were becoming more and more outrageous, it was undeniable that the children from those aristocratic families were indeed capable. There will always be talented people in every generation. Sigh, it's really one wave pushing the other. These young people are really amazing. They are all the pillars of the country. The deputy examiner beside Lu Shi sighed with emotion. The other examiners echoed in unison. Why else would they say that they are young talents? The world today will soon be theirs. It's good to be young. In a few years, perhaps old bones like us will have to give up our positions to the more capable. Nowadays, these young juniors really make one envious. A great scholar spoke. His sideburns were white, and his face was full of wrinkles. However, his skin was rosy, and he was full of vigor. The triennial assessment was a very important day for Dongqing. Although Lu Shi was the general examiner, there were more than 10 deputy examiners beside him. They were either old ministers in the court, famous scholars, or learned scholars. Every one of them had more experience than Lu Shi. However, Lu Shi hated it when they took advantage of their seniority. Listening to the few of them sighing, he secretly clicked his tongue in his heart. Then he sneered coldly. Even a pig would have 2 hooves to walk when a large amount of resources was thrown at it, let alone a human. The other assessments were almost done one after another. The atmosphere was also heated up. Under the urging of a few deputy examiners, Lu Shi got up from the couch. Then he took out a scroll from his sleeve. 2 maids came forward and removed the seal on the scroll. They unfolded it and hung it on the shelf. Seeing that scroll, all the scholars had already perked up. The highlight of the day's assessment was coming. When they saw the big word on the scroll, they were all stunned. They either frowned in deep thought or secretly muttered people. That was the only word on the scroll. It was also the topic of the assessment this time. In layman's terms, it was a written essay with a topic. The examiner gave the topic, and the students answered it freely. There was no limit to the number of words, the format of the content, and the theme of the article. As long as the topic was closely related to the people, be it governance of the people, farming, commodity trading, or education, it would not be considered as going off topic. It seemed simple, but in fact it was very difficult to deal with. First of all, the topic was too broad. There were many things that could be written. Because of this, it was too difficult to write something that was brilliant, incisive, thought-provoking, or to be praised by Lu Shi. Most of the time, it was better to be neutral. Secondly, Most of them were sons of aristocratic families with excellent family backgrounds. Although they did not talk about politics, they also did not have much contact with the common people. Most of what they knew came from books. If they were not careful, they could easily write false information. How could they enter the topic? To them, handing in the mission wasn't difficult. What was difficult was how to stand out and suppress the others. Of course, Jiang Pingji also saw the question. She frowned. Lu Shi's test question could be said to be easy, but it could also be said to be too difficult. It was indeed a bit tricky. The characters follow the corpse and follow the clan. Corpse meant that the body was unable to move, and by extension, it meant that the body could not migrate or move. Meant country and clan. When the two were combined, it was the people. If one thought about it in a divergent way, Min could not only be interpreted as the common people, but also as the national economy and the people's livelihood. From the connection between the two, the basic necessities of life, food, housing, and transportation related to the people could all be included in the thinking. The national economy and the people's livelihood, such as reading and being rich in the country, could also be used as a starting point for the question. More importantly, after Lu Shi gave the question, he did not give any other hints. The students were also very confused. If they could know Lu Shi's inner bias, they would be able to think about the key points and cater to his preferences. Many of the scholars were in a difficult position. When the deputy examiners saw it, although they had objections in their hearts, they did not say it out loud. He cared about the people's livelihood, and he was pragmatic. What else could they say? Seeing the question, Wei Xi curled his lips slightly. He was very sure that there was something wrong with Lu Shi. But overall, he did not seem to be that annoying. The question had been given, and it was not convenient for the scholars to communicate and discuss. Many examiners were watching from above, so they could only rely on their own abilities. While the others were still thinking about Lu Shi's preferences, a few scholars had already started to grind the stones, lay the paper, and picked up their pens to write. Lu Shi's eyes swept around. Those who started writing were basically the candidates that he had expected. He could not help but secretly sigh in his heart. They had left their names in the annals of history based on their abilities. Naturally, there was a certain reason for that. There was no point in being envious or jealous of such talents. He walked around a little and swept his gaze across the few people's writing desks. He could not help but nod. The question that he gave was indeed very broad, but as long as it did not deviate from the people, it would basically not stray from the topic. Rather than being greedy and wanting to state countless contents in a short space of time, which would result in the essay being empty, it was better to seize a point and focus on explaining it. Of course, it was one thing to understand the principle, but it was another thing to be able to write something substantial. Some people had already understood Lu Shi's intentions, but when they started writing, they realized that they could not write anything substantial. Based on their analysis of Lu Shi, he could be considered a practical person. What was the use of exaggerating? He might even prefer those who knew about agriculture and water conservancy, and were hardworking and capable. Of course, these people still had self-awareness. More people were disdainful. Everyone liked to listen to flattery. So what if the essay was beautifully written? As long as the general evaluation officer was comfortable reading it, it was fine. Therefore, there was no lack of fools who liked to show off their literary talent. Among the many scholars, Lu Shi cared the most about Master Yuanjing's few students and disciples. There was not much difference from what he had expected. Just from the content of the essay, he could actually feel out the temperament of these people. The only one that surprised him was Wei Xi, this fourth disciple of Master Yuanjing. It seemed that he was not like Amin had said. He only had a good face. Cheng Jing was steady and practical. He paid attention to farming and water conservancy. Han Yu was righteous and open-minded. His essay was related to the criminal law. Lu Zheng seemed to conform to the norm. But when he went deep into his essay, he pointed out the current shortcomings of Dongqing and cried out for the people. But this Wei Xi, just by looking at his appearance, he was like a jade-like person. He was cold and had a bit of gentlemanly gentleness. He was strangely harmonious. However, his article was quite spicy and pungent. Even if Wuxia admired his essay very much, he could not give him too high a score at this juncture. That was not the way to court death. This lad seemed to naively hope that all the people in the world could study. He gave a lot of practical suggestions and plans. The corner of Wuxia's mouth twitched. He provoked the authority of the gentry at this time. Was he not afraid of being put in a difficult position? He sighed secretly. Weixi's deliberate act of looking for trouble was King ridiculous in Amin's eyes. However, the troubling matter was not over yet. Jiang Pingji was in the pavilion watching many scholars immerse themselves in their essays. She felt slightly comfortable. That was the atmosphere of an examination. However, she changed her opinion very quickly. Hiss! The sound of cloth tearing rang out. Wuxia was about to use the incense burner to dry the ink stains on the essay that he had written. A scholar near him was still deep in thought. His face was flushed and his expression was a little squinted. He kept tearing at his clothes. The clothes that the scholar was wearing were old clothes. They were worn loosely. Naturally, they could not withstand such torment. Soon a big hole was torn. Wuxia was speechless. Wuxia heard the movement and turned his head. The Langjun had already taken off his clothes. He stood up from his seat with his back facing Wuxia. Wuxia was speechless. Chapter 295. The clothes slid down and piled up at the feet. Everything was exposed. Naturally, everything in front of the body could be seen. The filthy thing even had the tendency to raise its head. The passing maids could not help but scream when they saw it. The scholars who were alarmed by the scream turned their heads to look for the source of the movement. The deputy examiners who liked to flaunt their seniority also stopped chatting and looked up. All of a sudden, they felt like they were going blind. It was fine for the men. They had the parts that others had. So what if they saw it? At most, they would feel that it was an eyesore and spit at it for being immoral. However, the maids were different. They entered the royal palace. Strictly speaking, they were the emperor's women. Now that they saw the body of another strange man, and they were all virgins, they were suddenly frightened and screamed. It was already good of them to not be in a mess. Wuxia's face was livid. When he saw the scholar's smug expression, he immediately guessed what was going on. The audience in the streaming room took advantage of the camera angle and zoomed in to see the situation of the assessment clearly. Just as they were picking and choosing and sucking up to all kinds of handsome men, the naked Langjun occupied most of the screen. White and plump breasts, slender waist, white and skinny legs that were a little blue. The audience in the streaming room. The sparse bullet screen instantly became turbulent, and the overwhelming number of words blocked the virtual screen. Lianizi Huaji. Oh my god, my eyes are going blind. Zifengjin Baobao. It's too much. My mother was watching the streaming just now. Suddenly a high-definition breasts appeared. Now she suspects that I'm watching something dirty. She's going to the balcony to hit me with a clothes hanger. Help! Inyang Zuanshang. I'm the one who's miserable. My wife is starting to doubt my sexual orientation. Apart from these complaints and ridicule, the others were all copied and pasted to protect their eyes. Jiang Pingji was almost dumbfounded. She had just listened to an action blockbuster on the rockery. Now she came to peek at the assessment and encountered someone tearing his clothes and wanting to run away. She must have seen a fake assessment. The panic over there also attracted the attention of many people. They all ran to the octagonal pavilion to secretly see what was going on. As the person involved and the culprit of everything, the scholar was not ashamed. Instead, he was proud. The embarrassment and panic of the mates around him greatly pleased him. He threw his head back and laughed, blushing. All living beings come naked. This is their nature. Why are you all so alarmed? Wuxia snorted coldly and said harshly, Children are young and don't know shame. Are you the same? Etiquette, justice, honor, shame, and trust have been cultivated to perfection. That person heard Wuxia's sarcasm and turned his head to take a look. Wow, this was really amazing. He felt as if he heard the sound of his heart blossoming. It was incomparably wonderful. The scholar squinted his eyes and his footsteps floated as he approached Wuxia with a chuckle. I really didn't know that in this mediocre world, there's actually such a heavenly beauty. When I saw you, Lang Jun, I felt as if I had known you before. As if you were an old friend from Mount Wu. You look very familiar. Can we be like brothers? In layman's terms, it was, brother, I think we've had fun in our dreams before. Can we still go on a date? Nowadays, the Southern style was prevalent in Dongqing. There were many Qi brothers, and many scholars even regarded it as a fashion. However, there were still many straight men in the world. They were rather disgusted by such actions that went against yin and yang, due to the orthodox public opinion of the harmony of yin and yang. Although there were many sworn brothers, most of them would do it in secret. Very few of them would confess their love to another man in public. Not to mention that after eating too much of the hanshi powder, one's brain would turn over, and one's clothes would be taken off. One would flirt with someone of the same gender. Wei Xi's expression was completely unsightly. What did it mean to be an old friend from Mount Wu? Did he still want to be like brothers? The seats of all the scholars were fixed, so Master Yuanjing's students and disciples did not gather together. Hearing the commotion and seeing that Wei Xi was actually being teased by a libertine who had taken drugs, his face instantly darkened, and he was very angry. Who would have thought that someone would be so daring to take hanshi powder at the assessment site? It was fine if he used it, but he was so excited that he forgot where he was. This was the place for assessment, not an ordinary gathering. Although he was angry, if Wei Xi was really offended and taken advantage of by this fellow, how would his reputation be in the future? Thinking of this, a few scholars from Langyi Academy went forward to stop him. However, they were quite far away from him. The scholar who was high was only 3 to 4 steps away from Wei Xi. Comparing them, it was obvious who would be the first to seduce Wei Xi. Lu Shi was so angry that his eyes were filled with murderous intent. He clenched his teeth and said, "Guards, take this person away." In order not to disturb the scholar's assessment, the guards who were an eyesore were all waiting outside. It would take some time for them to come in. Wei Xi restrained the anger on his face. His gaze was cold, as if he was looking at a dead person. With a cold face, he stood up, picked up the writing table with both hands, and swung it directly at the scholar. He did it in one go. Everyone was speechless. Wei Xi looked down and said, "Immoral." His hand was still holding onto the writing table. No, it should be said that half of the writing table, and the other half was hanging on the scholar's face. Looking at the broken writing table, then looking at the scholar's face that was covered in blood, many people secretly shuddered. If the writing table had been smashed on their faces, wouldn't their faces be flattened, so that even their parents wouldn't be able to recognize them? Wei Xi's fingernails were neatly trimmed, but because he used too much force, his fingertips were pale. His fingers used force, and his knuckles were distinct. The veins on the back of his hands were bulging. It was obvious that his heart was not as calm as he looked. At this moment, the guards rushed over. Wei Xi raised his head and glanced at Lu Shi and the scholars. He bowed with a calm expression, pursed his lips and left with a wave of his sleeves. He was very clear that there was no need for him to stay. Even if there was a reason for hitting someone during the assessment, it was very likely that he would be disqualified. Rather than continuing to stay and becoming a laughingstock, it was better to leave quickly to avoid being bullied and humiliated. Lu Shi bent over to pick up Wei Xi's answer paper. Because the ink had not completely dried, and the ink on the inkstone on the writing table had spilled, a lot of the content was dyed black. Lu Shi shook the paper, and took the incense burner to dry the ink. "Tsk, what a pity." Lu Shi pointed at the scholar coldly. "Drag this disgraceful person away." Wei Xi was at least high-spirited, and took the initiative to leave. However, the scholar who made a mistake and caused trouble was personally ordered by Lu Shi to drag him away. Comparing the two, no one would be bothered about Wei Xi injuring someone. They would only feel pity that the child was unlucky. This was only one of the reasons. More importantly, Lu Shi's action had almost negated everything about the scholar. His scholarly reputation was completely ruined. After being hit in the face with the writing table, the intense pain caused the scholar's light-headed head to return to the human world from heaven. There was still a pleasant aftertaste in his body. However, when he saw everything around him clearly and the cold wind blew, he realized that he was naked and almost fainted. Chapter 296. His brain had cooled down, and he no longer had that unruly drive. It was late autumn, and when the wind blew, he felt a chill all over his body. His legs were trembling, and his legs were trembling. He was afraid. Lu Shi saw the change in his expression and sneered coldly. The evaluation is related to the country and the future of Dongqing. It is such a serious and sacred matter, and someone took off his clothes and ran around in public without any sense of shame. He has learned all the words of a saint. It is really an eye-opener. The scholars were as quiet as chickens. The frightened maids knelt on the ground and trembled. Seeing that the guards did not take action, Lu Shi said in a calm tone, "Drag him away. Do you really not understand human language?" A few deputy examiners were about to plead for mercy, although they also felt that the scholar had gone overboard. Consuming hanshi powder had become a trend in the upper class of Dongqing. It was an elegant matter. Even if the reaction was over the top, it was because the powder was not used properly. This kind of matter was not a special case, and should be dealt with according to the circumstances. Muddle-headed, before they could speak, Lu Shi had already scolded. Although he did not mention names, how could those old foxes not know that he was scolding them? Instantly, their expressions were as colorful as a palette of colors. The guards lowered their heads, but in the end, they still dragged the man away. Lu Shi's face was cold. He smoked and dried Wei Si's examination paper, and folded it into his sleeve. The audience in the streaming room could not hear what Lu Shi scolded, but looking at his expression, they knew that the streamer's father was really angry. More importantly, no matter how one looked at it, that scholar's actions seemed like he was high on drugs. Librarian, that's strange. Why do I feel that there is something wrong with the scholar's behavior just now? Daming Iguan. It's not just not right, he was basically drugged. What's the difference between this and taking off one's clothes in the examination hall with the intention of touching or molesting another student? No matter who you are, you must be thrown out. I don't know if I have seen too many court intrigues, but I feel that this matter is not that simple. Maybe this student was plotted against. In an instant he thought of a court intrigue. Lao Siji Lianmeng. I think he ate too much hanshi powder. How is this a plot? Earth's most handsome man. Hanshi powder? What was that? Lao Siji Lianmeng. Hanshi powder, also known as five stones powder, is a type of poison that can cause addiction and hallucinations. After consumption, the poison will spread and the body will develop a huge internal heat. Long-term consumption will result in chronic poisoning. But the ancients believed that after the consumption of hanshi powder, it would have the effect of clearing one's mind, and it would be as if the gods were helping one to compose poems. It was probably because of this that the naughty brat took the pill during the assessment. Nougat. Isn't this poison? Jiang Pingji could not help but raise her eyebrows when she saw the contents of the bullet screen. She knew about it. Hanshi powder was a popular luxury item among the aristocrats of Dongqing. In Lu Shi's memory, he had seen many scholars in Hejian County drinking hanshi powder to liven things up during gatherings. Another member of the audience searched for the information of hanshi powder on Baidu, and copied and pasted a whole bunch of information, which could be considered as a form of education for those who didn't know about it. Lao Siji Lianmeng. Hanshi powder is addictive, but from a certain aspect, it is scarier than drugs. Jiang Pingji glanced at it and put it down disinterestedly. The audience in the streaming room belonged to the modern era. To them, hanshi powder was still very scary. However, Jiang Pingji grew up in the interstellar era, where technology was highly advanced. The various kinds of drugs that were once feared by people in her eyes were not qualified to enter her sights. Bingtang Ningmeng. That's scary. If one accidentally becomes addicted to this thing, wouldn't he be crippled? It wasn't easy to get rid of drugs in the ancient era. Think about our Chinese country. Think about opium. If this thing were to be widely spread, the consequences would be unthinkable. This bullet screen gained the support of many viewers. Host V. There's no need to be so worried. Hanshi powder can only be spread in a small area. This thing is very expensive. Ordinary people can't afford to use it, which prevents the possibility of it being spread widely. After consuming hanshi powder, One still needs to go through a very complicated process to disperse the excess internal heat in the body. If there's a mistake during the dispersion, it could lead to death. The people can't afford it. Even so, the harm of Hanshi powder can't be ignored. In the current ancient era, the upper-class society is in low spirits. The atmosphere of society will also be led astray. The unlucky ones are the lower-class people. Jiang Pingji looked at the scholars participating in the assessment, her brows slightly furrowed. She suddenly lost interest to continue watching. Hanshi powder indeed couldn't enter her eyes, because based on the physical qualities of humans in the future, it's basically impossible to use Hanshi powder to cause people to become addicted. But the people in the ancient era were different. They were too weak. Those aristocrats who were spoiled since young were even weaker. Once one becomes addicted, it would be difficult to quit. Probably no one has the willpower to quit. The noble scholars, they have the money to buy Hanshi powder. They will be fine as long as they continue to consume it. Why would they go through hardships to quit? In the current pyramid society, where illiterates are everywhere, the influence of the elites on the lower class is too big. The decadence of the elites will cause the whole world to be decadent. They are useless. It will also cause the atmosphere of the whole society to be foul. She pursed her lips into a straight line. She didn't alert anyone. She quietly left the octagonal pavilion. After such an episode, Lu Shi didn't have the mood to host the assessment. He waited for all the scholars to finish answering their questions. He ordered people to collect all the papers of the scholars. For the sake of fairness, the names of the scholars were all covered with white cloths. They will be assessed slowly. Han Yu's face was full of worry. Zixiao this time. Isn't it too much of a loss? Why did he encounter such an unlucky thing? He didn't look at the almanac when he went out. Lu Jing said, Zixiao is always meticulous. I hope this incident won't bring too much of a blow to him. Their master, Master Yuan Jing, was not surprised at all that Wei Ci left the assessment halfway. Instead, he smiled calmly. I know about this. You don't have to worry too much. Zixiao already has a plan. Wei Ci never thought of serving Dongqing. What meaning does the assessment result have to him? If it wasn't for Master Yuanjing's request, Wei Ci wouldn't be there today. Jiang Pingji walked back and coincidentally met Feng Jin, who came out to look for her. This is an important place for the royal family. Didn't I tell you not to wander around? Feng Jin looked her up and down. He was secretly relieved to make sure that there was nothing unusual about her. She didn't seem to have caused any trouble. I just wanted to watch the assessment from afar. There are people around. If I did something wrong, I can't be the only one to be in trouble. Jiang Pingji glanced at the other scholars and noble ladies, indicating to Feng Jin that she was innocent. I'm afraid that you don't know the rules here, right? It was not easy for him to take care of a naughty child, an injured person. Don't be fooled by the beauty of the royal garden. Who knows what demons and monsters are hiding in the dark? If you accidentally ruin someone's plan, you might lose your head. Jiang Pingji walked to Feng Jin's side. They walked side by side on the narrow path. They were quite a distance away from the others. It seems that you are very experienced. I just found Wu Ma Jun and a girl named Nyina in the rockery cave. TSK. It was intense. Is this a big deal? Chapter 297. Nyina. This name doesn't belong to a woman from Dongqing at all. Is she from a different tribe? Feng Jin's expression changed, and an ominous premonition flashed in his heart. Jiang Pingji raised her hand and pointed to the north. She smiled meaningfully. Feng Jin understood, but he was not happy that he had guessed the other party's identity. Instead, his face turned pale. The decree of marriage has been issued. She's the fourth sister-in-law of His Highness. How dare Wu Ma Jun? Brother-in-law and sister-in-law are having an affair. Does Wu Ma Jun know what he's doing? Jiang Pingji rolled her eyes contemptuously. Wu Ma Jun is carrying forward the virtues passed down from his ancestors. Besides, Nyina has ill intentions after marrying into the royal family. She seduced Wu Ma Jun, and he has his own plans. Won't they be together? According to Wu Ma Jun's ambition, even if Nyina did not seduce him on purpose, would he be able to protect his belt? Neither of them were good people. Feng Jin hesitated and did not move forward. His heart was full of struggle. This matter, Jiang Pengji said in a low voice. Why are you so worried about the scandal of the royal family? Your father has retired from his official post and is waiting for the situation to change. Do you still want to risk your life for Dongqing? Even if you say that Yaina and Wu Majun are having an affair, what evidence can you show? The marriage between the northern borderline and Dongqing is already set in stone. Any obstacles in between will be eradicated. After listening to her, his expression kept changing. After a long time, he let out a long sigh. Forget it. This matter indeed has nothing to do with me. Feng Jin was very clear about Wu Majun's ambition. Feng Jin could more or less guess his purpose of seducing the princess of the northern borderline, Yaina. However, that person was only ambitious but had no brains. He did not see the big picture. That was what Feng Jin despised the most about Wu Majun. Getting in touch with the royal family of the northern borderline through Yaina was tantamount to asking a tiger for its skin. He would be bitten to death. Jiang Pingji tilted her head and looked at Feng Jin's side profile. She said, "This matter has nothing to do with you. Let me tell you something that is related to you." Feng Jin's heart skipped a beat. He asked her without changing his expression. "What is it?" Jiang Pingji said. "During the assessment just now, a scholar consumed hanshi powder and took off all his clothes in front of everyone. Yes, you didn't hear wrongly. He stripped naked in front of all the scholars, my father, and the other deputy examiners. He even flirted with Master Yuanjing's disciple Wei Zixiao." Feng Jin was stunned. His eyes widened involuntarily. This is simply absurd. Jiang Pingji told Feng Jin about it as a joke and teased him. "You should be glad that you didn't go for the assessment because of your arm injury. Otherwise, perhaps the one that libertine has his eyes on would be your beauty, Feng Huayu." Why did he feel like his hands were itching to beat the brat in front of him? Jiang Pengji burst into laughter. Her eyes were filled with a relaxed smile. "Forget it. Since you're so honest, I'll stop teasing you." Feng Jin's expression was stiff. He looked a little angry, but Jiang Pengji smiled from the bottom of her heart. The two of them walked through the veranda and looked from afar. They seemed to be chatting and laughing. When they were about to leave the garden, Jiang Pengji noticed a strange gaze. She subconsciously stopped smiling and looked at the source of the gaze. In her line of sight, there was only a disappearing piece of cloth. "Did you see someone you know?" Feng Jin asked her. "Sort of, but he's very guarded against me. I don't know how I offended him." Jiang Pengji shook her head. If Wei Xi liked to avoid her, then so be it. She wanted to see how long he could keep his secret. "Huayu, how much do you know about Langia County?" Feng Jin retracted his gaze and looked in the direction where Jiang Pengji was looking at. He didn't see anyone. "Langia County? I forgot that you're going to Langia with Master Yuanjing to study. It's better to be prepared. You should do your homework and understand the situation of the aristocratic families in Langia." Feng Jin smiled. He thought Jiang Pengji was worried about studying in the future. Langia County is a place where military strategists fight for it. It's also a place full of spiritual energy and nurtures many outstanding talents. It's a place where aristocratic families gather. Jiang Pengji nodded. She knew all that. "I heard that there are many aristocratic families in Langia County. They're not to be trifled with." Hejian County was rich in beauties, while Langia County was rich in scholars and heroes. Many famous scholars were basically from Langia. The two were completely different in Dongqing. Feng Jin comforted Jiang Pengji. "They're indeed not to be trifled with. But as long as you know your place, no one will deliberately make things difficult for you for the sake of Lu County Chief. Moreover, when you enter Langia Academy, Master Yuanjing will protect you. What are you afraid of? As long as the friend beside her didn't make a fuss, she would definitely have a good life in Langia County." Jiang Pengji asked again. "Then, have you heard of the Wei family of Langia?" Feng Jin listened and frowned. He rummaged in his mind for a long time. "The Wei family of Langia? I have some impression of it. If I remember correctly, the branch of the Wei family of Langia is a branch that branched off from the Wei family of Bianzhou not long after the founding of the Xia dynasty. But this branch has been declining for a long time." It's getting worse with each generation. Bianzhou was located in Zhongzhou. The Wei family of Bianzhou was considered a first-class aristocratic family in Zhongzhou. Do you know the current situation of the Wei family of Langia? Jiang Pingji asked. I vaguely heard that the branch of the Wei family of Langia has returned to the Wei family of Bianzhou and returned to the main clan. Although it's said to be returning, it's actually just living under someone else's roof. But if they don't do that, they may completely fall from grace and become a commoner. The most important part of the assessment was family background. It took up a lot of points. Commoner families could only be inferior. If they returned to the main clan, they could enjoy the shade under a big tree. After all, they were an ancestor. Regardless of how they lived, at least they would be a well-known aristocratic family, and not a commoner family. Jiang Pingji frowned and said, Huayu, do you mean that the Wei family of Langia has moved back to Zhongzhou? If that was the case, Wei Xi shouldn't be from the Wei family of Langia. Was it just a coincidence of the surname? It should be. Feng Jin shook his head and said with pity, It's impossible for the branch to return to the main clan under normal circumstances. The Wei family of Langia made such a choice because they were at the end of their rope. They had no choice but to do so. Why is Lanting interested in this? She shook her head and said, It's nothing. I'm just asking out of curiosity. The two of them talked as they walked. When they returned to the banquet, they watched the singing and dancing for a while. Jiang Pingji saw someone taking hanshi powder in public not far away. His expression was one of enjoyment. She was startled and suddenly thought of something. Huayu, do you know when hanshi powder became popular in Dongqing? Chapter 298. Isn't there an approximate time? Jiang Pingji had some guesses in her heart, but she didn't have any concrete evidence. She had read so many books before, and there were indeed some records about hanshi powder. According to unofficial historical records, in the previous dynasty, there was a wandering necromancer who presented a magical prescription to the emperor of the Xia kingdom that could extend one's lifespan and strengthen one's body. It could allow a man to have sufficient yang energy and be vigorous in bed. That prescription was hanshi powder, and it had the effect of treating typhoid. Before the five kingdoms separated into Xia, this hanshi powder had always been a secret prescription of the palace. It wasn't leaked to the public, and only the emperor could enjoy it. Later on, when the five kingdoms separated into Xia, the hanshi powder that was once regarded as a god disappeared without a trace. When it reappeared, it became a popular trend pursued by the nobles. Feng Jin frowned and shook his head, saying, I'm not sure about this. If Lanting is curious, I'll go back and check it out for you. Jiang Pingji nodded. Then I'll have to trouble you. Feng Jin turned his head and thought about it. He felt that Jiang Pingji's sudden questions were a little weird. What's the problem with this hanshi powder? Jiang Pingji sneered. The problem is huge. Take a look, those who have been consuming hanshi powder for a long time. Which one of them still has energy? They are muddle-headed all day, as if they are going to meet their ancestors at any time. They don't have the heart to do proper work, and their actions are absurd. Their temperament is even more unpredictable. Now after consuming hanshi powder, they still strip in public. Under normal circumstances, who would strip naked and expose their body to outsiders? Feng Jin had always heard about how good hanshi powder was, and how comfortable it was after consuming it, but he had never touched it. If he were to indulge in hanshi powder like those idle playboys, not to mention anything else, his father Feng Ren would be the first to not let him off. Hearing Jiang Pingji's reminder, he came back to his senses and vaguely understood something. Hanshi powder is addictive, Jiang Pingji said with a cold face. She did not care about such outdated things, but the physical qualities of the people in ancient times were too poor. The possibility of addiction was high. If you take it for a long time and want to quit, the process is extremely painful. Ordinary people can't bear it. Feng Jin's expression turned a little strange. But this hanshi powder is mostly used by nobles. The common people will not be implicated, Jiang Pingji sneered. Look at what you're saying. It's as if the people at the helm are the people. Feng Jin was speechless. After a while he said, Jean will investigate this matter when I get back. Jiang Pengji lowered her eyes. She wasn't sure if the Hanshi powder was a conspiracy, but she was sure that this thing was like a catalyst, which stimulated the original hidden danger. After leaving the royal courtyard, she sat alone in the carriage, her face cold as she flipped through the information about Hanshi powder that the viewers in the live streaming room had found. It was almost the same as what she saw in the unofficial history. In the dimension of the viewers in the live streaming room, Hanshi powder was initially used to treat typhoid, but because of some people who were courting death, they changed the prescription, causing the medicine to become poisonous. It was spread to the aristocrats and became a popular consumption trend. In the current dimension, Hanshi powder was presented to the emperor by the wandering necromancers as a good prescription for health. But the emperor of Xia used it wantonly. After the 5 countries divided into Xia, the secret prescription of Hanshi powder was also spread to the hands of a certain country. This harmful thing? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but shake her head. Back at the Feng residence, Takshu had already prepared hot soup and clean clothes. Jiang Pingji went to take a bath. Her long hair was still wet. Takshu used a dry cloth to wipe her hair and absorb the water. Xiaoyu, help me get the Great Universal Geographical Map. Jiang Pingji unfolded the Great Universal Geographical Map. The contents on it were personally copied by her. There were many small words on it. Her long hair was almost dry. Jiang Pingji let Takshu leave and said to Suku, Father is probably going to retire. Suku was shocked after hearing that. He couldn't help but raise his head to look at her. Our master is going to retire? But how old was Lu Shi? Arichi wasn't even 40 yet. He had just passed 30 years of age. Why was he thinking of retiring? Hu County is a hot potato. If it wasn't for father's strong hand, how could he have defended it until now? Jiang Pingji's eyes flashed with coldness. The 2 prefectures near Hu County had a food shortage. Who wouldn't be jealous if they managed to survive with just Hu County? Not only will the aristocrats be jealous, but the emperor is even more jealous. I think he's going to cause trouble. Father already had the intention to retire before he came to Shangjing. I think this matter is going to end like this. Suka frowned and said softly, but if master loses Hu County, he won't be able to rest easy without someone to rely on. After all, although Lu Shi didn't kill all the aristocrats in Hu County, he offended a lot of them. Jiang Pingji said, that depends on how you choose. Hu County's terrain is easy to attack and difficult to defend. Moreover, the military is weak. If it's Dongqing, this place will definitely become a fat piece of meat that everyone covets. What's the difference between this and a toddler carrying gold in a busy market? Rather than having food in your hands and not being able to protect it, it's better to give it up temporarily and move to another place as soon as possible. After hearing that, Suku was silent for a while and said, I think that if you submit a memorial to retire, you will most likely be promoted to a prefecture magistrate. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Hu County was already a big county that produced food. It was the best piece of land in the whole of Dongqing. Lu Shi had spent several years to manage the county to this state. If he retired now, people would only think that the emperor was too greedy. In order to stop people from gossiping, if Lu Shi said he wanted to retire, he would most likely be appointed as a prefecture magistrate to show the emperor's benevolence. Although it was a demotion, it was better to have a good reputation. I think so too. Currently, there are 6 prefectures and 21 counties in Dongqing. Only Yuanzhou is still lacking a prefecture magistrate. When he heard Yuanzhou, Suka's face suddenly turned cold. But this place in Yuanzhou was located to the north of Dongqing and bordered the northern borderline. There were 2 counties, Shangyu County and Changhe County. Archiguan Rang was from Shangyu County. The 6 cities that were lost were all in Shangyu County. Now there were still 3 cities in the hands of the northern borderline. That was not all. Due to the many years of war between the northern borderline and Dongqing, Yuanzhou was already in a mess, and the population was low. Now that Dongqing and the northern borderline were connected by marriage, and Nanxing came to borrow troops, according to the emperor's idiotic character, he might transfer the troops guarding the border. When that time came, Yuan Zhou would have to face the covetous eyes of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. It was not easy to be the prefecture magistrate of Yuanzhou. However, it was precisely because it was not easy that Lu Shi went to Yuanzhou to seek the greatest benefits. Jiang Pingji had also been eyeing this place at first. Only in Yuanzhou can he openly recruit soldiers and buy horses. After all, even if the 2 countries are connected by marriage, the 3 cities of Shangyu County are still in the hands of the northern borderline. The land is indispensable, Jiang Pingji said. Suka listened carefully. Yuanzhou has another important advantage. She wrote 4 words. The aristocrats are scarce. The aristocrats are scarce, which means that they will be subject to fewer restrictions and constraints. Suka thought about it seriously and faintly understood Jiang Pingji's choice. Yuanzhou seemed to be in danger, but it was actually a great opportunity. Yuanzhou and Hu County share a border. Father has been operating in Hu County for so many years, so he must have a backup plan. The county chief sent by the imperial court will not be able to control the entire Hu County in a short period of time. In other words, Hu County is still secretly in father's hands. Yuanzhou's soldiers and Hu County's provisions. The combination of the 2 was what Jiang Pingji wanted. Apart from that, there is another important reason. Chongzhou is rich in sandalwood. Chapter 299. Suka was stunned for a moment. He did not understand the connection between Chongzhou's abundance of red sandalwood and her preference for Chongzhou. Don't underestimate this baitan. Jiang Pingji smiled and revealed a hint of gentleness. In the beginning, my goal was not Chongzhou. But because of this baitan, I changed my mind. If father is appointed as the magistrate of Chongzhou, many plans can be started. Jiang Pingji wanted to disrupt the current system of passing on knowledge. The first problem was not facing the censure of the aristocratic families, but the carrier of the books. Our bamboo slips were heavy, and the cost was high. Therefore, even if a family of a few people worked for a lifetime, they would not be able to support a scholar. Although bamboo paper was good, it had some shortcomings. The annual output of the paper workshop was limited. Apart from the need to control the output, due to its rarity, the other reason was the limited raw materials. The forest in Hejian County was dense, but there were very few bamboo forests. The quality of the bamboo would also affect the quality of the bamboo paper. Taking the means of transportation in ancient times as an example, in order to save as much money as possible, the production materials had to be sourced locally. Therefore, most of the bamboo paper produced by the paper workshop was sold to various aristocratic families. The other portion was used for their own use. The scale of production had never been expanded. Jiang Pingji's ambition was not limited to this. The output of bamboo paper could not satisfy her needs. Naturally, she had to find another way. Jiang Pingji searched through all kinds of wood and found the wood that was the closest to the green sandalwood tree. The audience in the streaming room said that they used rice paper in ancient times, and one of the raw materials for rice paper was the green sandalwood tree. Red sandalwood has a hard and dense texture. It is tough and resistant to wear and tear. It can be made into sturdy and durable farming tools, furniture, and axles. Its stem, bark, and branches are even more useful. Jiang Pingji said in a low voice. She wrote a word on the table with her finger. Paper. Suko understood, and his eyes seemed to light up a few degrees. Really? Jiang Pingji nodded. The paper workshop's technology for making bamboo paper was very mature. Even if they changed the raw materials, they could make new paper after some experimentation. The raw materials were cheap, and with the support of mature technology, this meant that the cost of the new paper would be much lower, at least cheaper than it was now. Suka rubbed his hands together in agitation. Once he thought about how he could buy a lot of bamboo paper at a low price, his heart trembled. But if Chongzhou accidentally falls into the hands of others, then wouldn't my plan be? Jiang Pingji said. Therefore, I still need to inform my father about this matter. Try to think of a way to operate it, and take over Chongzhou openly. Based on the current situation, it would not be difficult to take down Chongzhou. What he was afraid of was an accident along the way. I do need to discuss this matter with Master. Suke secretly took a few deep breaths to suppress the excitement in his heart. Coming from a commoner's family, no one knew better than him how hard it was to learn to read and write. If it wasn't for the fact that his teacher was a good person and took pity on Suke's talent, he wouldn't have been able to study at all. If the Langjun in front of him could really accomplish such a magnificent feat, Suke would be willing to be his slave for the rest of his life. Also, there's one more thing. Jiang Pingji lowered her eyelids, stood up, and took out a dark green box from a book box. There were a few stacks of paper in it. They were all drawn by Jiang Pingji herself. She unfolded them and placed them in front of Suke. Take a look at this. What do you think? Suke did not understand. He opened it up and read it carefully. He was a little confused and did not understand what it meant. However, the audience in the streaming room understood. Our paper was not enough. Copying books by hand was too exhausting, so printing was a must. Our librarian. Is the streamer going to use printing in secret? Movable type printing or engraving printing? Lao CG Lianmeng. Of course it's movable type printing. But engraving printing is better than movable type printing in certain situations. Dayin Kuema Wang. I'm disappointed. I wanted to see if the streamer could create a printing machine or something. I didn't expect it to be printing. Saitong Dafin Anti. TSK. A tall building starts from the ground. No matter how good the streamer is, she's just one person. The technology in that world is just like that. According to Dayin Kuema Wang, you should be complaining about why the streamer doesn't build a space carrier. Paper and printing. Jiang Pingji had thought about these two things a long time ago. She had a workshop to make bamboo paper. The technology was ready-made, so she only needed to think about how to save money and choose the right raw materials. As for printing, she only knew about printing machines. That thing was an extremely old antique in her world. It was something that only existed in the history books. How would Jiang Pingji know about the mechanical parts and structure? Besides, even if she knew about it, the material technology in that world did not support her making it. Since there was no way to get a printing machine, she could only settle for the next best thing and choose a more stupid method. She engraved the characters needed for the book in advance, then typeset the characters for printing. She could not tell much about one or two books, but if she printed thousands of books, the efficiency would naturally be incomparable. Suke put down the drawing paper in confusion and said, Langjun this. Jiang Pingji took out her private seal and stamped it on the paper. Then she raised her eyebrows at Suke. You still don't understand? An idea flashed through Suke's mind. He hurriedly picked up the drawing paper. He was so excited that he did not know how to react. It's not that simple. It's too early to be excited. Jiang Pingji shook her head and said, At first I wanted to use clay as a mold, but firing it would take a lot of time. I still have to figure out the composition of the clay to prevent the characters from changing shape. If I want to fire it, I'll need to build a kiln. Suke thought about it and said, Then I'll look for other materials. Copper, iron, wood. Using copper and iron as raw materials to make a mold would cost a lot of materials. Wood was not bad, but it would also cause problems, such as deformation, moisture, and worms. Jiang Pingji lowered her eyelids and said, Cedar is actually not bad. It's not easy to get worms, the texture is fine, and it won't change shape too much. If we choose a dry place, it should be stored for a long time. But we still have to try it to know the effect. The key was that the wood was cheap, so it would be easier to carve. Suke nodded solemnly. If these two things were done, not only would he be famous for a long time, but at least he would benefit countless students who were eager to study. Work for the present, benefit for the future. Put it away. When we really have a firm foothold, we'll take it one step at a time. Jiang Pingji stood up and patted Suke's shoulder. Lu Shi and the other examiners had to examine the examination papers in a heavily guarded place. He was the main examiner, and the other examiners assisted him. They graded all the papers with names on them. They listed them as excellent, medium, and poor, and then calculated the grades of the other items. R. Chapter 300. Wuxia held a weak candle in his right hand and walked silently through the corridor. The moonlight elongated his shadow on the door. Our master? Wuxia stopped in his tracks and saw a figure sitting upright in front of him. Master Yuanjing tilted his head and waved at Wuxia. Zixiao, come to me. Seeing the cloak draped over Master Yuanjing's shoulders, Wuxia went forward and sat beside him. He placed the lamp aside. How long has Master been waiting here? Wuxia did not need to ask to know that Master Yuanjing was waiting for him. It's not important. Master Yuanjing said plainly with a hint of a smile. Zixiao is not a reckless person. I've heard about today's assessment from Yumo and Xiaoyin. Hitting someone with a book in public. Even when you were 3 or 5 years old, you wouldn't have done this. Wuxia's face was slightly red. He lowered his head and admitted his mistake. Your disciple knows his mistake. Please punish me, Master. Master Yuanjing shook his head and asked, why should I punish him? I don't think you did anything wrong. On the contrary, you played very well. It wasn't as if he had beaten someone to death. That scholar's actions were indeed too much. Who wouldn't be infuriated? Master Yuanjing nagged. I'm not here to scold you today. I just want to tell you that it's okay to be more casual. Your personality is too serious, and your thoughts are heavy. You like to keep everything to yourself and hide it from everyone. To put it bluntly, other people aren't like roundworms in your stomach. How would they know what you're thinking? Wuxia remained silent with his head lowered. No one knew if he heard it or not. Master Yuanjing massaged his numb leg and said casually, there are some things that you should say if you want to say them. Your disciple does not dare to say. Wuxia had a lot of things he wanted to say, but he could not say them no matter how hard he tried. Master Yuanjing smiled. Zixiao, there are many taboos for strategists. One of them is not to use your own heart to guess the intentions of others. I know why you don't dare to say it. From what you can see, you already have the answer in your heart, so there's no need to say it. Isn't that so? Wuxia remained silent. Master Yuanjing smiled helplessly. I don't deny your ability to read people's minds, but I'm afraid you'll miscalculate one person. Even though Master Yuanjing did not name the person, Wuxia had a tacit understanding with this teacher. He knew who it was. Only by thoroughly understanding it can we have a flawless plan. Master Yuanjing pouted his lips at Wuxia and teased. In the future, we'll see each other all the time. If you treat her with the prejudice you had in the past, I'm afraid that the truth will be revealed even faster. The past is gone like smoke. You should observe everything around you with a new attitude. Don't be blinded by the past. If you can't do this, you'll still lose. And lose even more miserably. Wuxia's expression finally changed. He looked at Yuanjing with some shock and avoidance in his eyes. Master Yuanjing laughed softly and said, I'm old, but I'm not blind yet. After a long time, Wuxia broke the silence. Teacher, I want to leave for a few days. Master Yuanjing said. Because you want to escape? Wuxia shook his head and smiled bitterly. If I were so cowardly and unable to face reality, I would have moved to Zhongzhou with my people. Why would I stay in Langyi and come to Shangjing? It was an accident to meet her. It's not that I can't accept it, but when I saw her in her teens, I didn't have any determination. Instead, I felt a little lost. It was as if I never knew her. Wuxia, who had always been a man of few words, was now like a child. He poured out all the thoughts that he had been suppressing in his heart for a long time in front of Yuanjing. Master Yuanjing played the role of a listener, or he could vaguely guess Wuxia's experience, but he didn't expect that this child had so much conflict and pain in his heart. If you feel uncomfortable, leave for a while and sort out your thoughts, Master Yuanjing said. Wuxia shook his head and said, I'm fine. You don't have to worry. Now that I look at it, many things are different. People are different too, especially her. If I continue to be tied down by the memories of the past, I'm afraid my life will be worse than before. Ri's goal was to leave his name in the annals of history as an honorable strategist, not as a lowly one. Not only was she ridiculed and criticized by the later generations, but it also became a stain on her. Arichi used to think that the former caused him pain, but when the sword pierced his throat, he suddenly realized that the latter was even more unacceptable. Master Yuanjing looked at Wei Ci for a long time and sighed. It's good that you think this way. Get to know people again. Old people have new faces. Wei Ci secretly clenched his fist. I understand. On the other side, Lu Shi returned to the Foam residence in a carriage with exhaustion. The rankings of the assessment had already been arranged. He made a copy of the list and stored it in a letter. He sealed it and presented it to the emperor. As for whether the emperor would read it or not, that was not something he could interfere with. The results would be released in 3 days. After the release of the results, it would be the Qionglin banquet. As the general evaluation officer, he had to show up. After that, there was basically nothing for him to do. The guest room was brightly lit. Lu Shi saw his daughter's maid, Takshu, waiting at the door with a lantern in her hand. Lanting didn't come back tonight? He gathered his cloak to block the cold wind from the outside world. Seeing Lu Shi return, Takshu's face lit up and she walked forward. Master, your servant has been waiting for you here on Longjuan's orders. Lu Shi frowned and said seriously, why is Lanting looking for me? Lu Shi had always valued his daughter. She must have something important to tell him, and could not be delayed. Langjun didn't say. He just asked me to tell you that Langjun is waiting in your room. Lu Shi nodded as he walked. He wondered why his daughter was looking for him. At the door of the room, there was indeed a lantern in the room. Jiang Pingji was reading a book under the candlelight. Father. Jiang Pingji looked up when she heard the noise. I heard from Takshu that you were looking for me? Lu Shi hurriedly closed the door to prevent the cold wind from blowing away the warm air in the room. Father, you haven't submitted your resignation report, have you? Jiang Pingji asked. Of course not. I plan to submit it after the Qionglin banquet. Lu Shi sat opposite Jiang Pingji and saw that she was holding a universal geographical map. Lanting, do you have any good suggestions? Father, you want to be a rich man, but I'm unfilial. I'd like to ask you to work hard for a while longer. Lu Shi raised his eyebrows. You're not going to submit the report? Jiang Pingji shook her head and whispered, that's not the case. I want you to try your best to take over Chongzhou. Chongzhou? Lu Shi thought about it and understood. You want to take the opportunity to gather troops? Chapter 301. Lu Shi did not let Jiang Pingji explain in detail. He raised his hand to stop her from speaking. He closed his eyes slightly. The candlelight shone on his eyelashes, casting 2 small shadows that covered the green in his eyes. You don't have to explain too much. The Feng residence may not be completely safe. Lu Shi did not know Jiang Pingji's perception. He was afraid that the walls had ears. His expression softened. Whatever you want to do, there is nothing I won't do. Chongzhou is actually a good place. Jiang Pingji opened her mouth, as if something was stuck in her throat. She could not spit it out or swallow it. Based on Lu Shi's years of experience in officialdom, how could he not see the danger in Chongzhou? Lu Shi saw her expression and laughed. He raised his hand to rub the top of her head. He said warmly, you don't have to worry about me. Hu County was so chaotic back then. But didn't I survive until now? The northern borderline is ambitious, and has been eyeing Chongzhou for a long time. But since they are connected by marriage with the royal family, they will at least pretend to be obedient. Before the princess of the northern borderline turns the royal family upside down, the northern borderline will not make a move. In other words, Chongzhou was still in a relatively safe state for the next few years. It could be governed and developed in peace. However, after this deadline, Chongzhou would have to face the covetous eyes of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. It would welcome the trampling of their armored cavalry. Jiang Pingji clenched her fists, pursed her lips and solemnly promised, Father, please work hard for 2 years. I will take care of you until you are 100 years old. Lu Shi could not help but laugh. His expression became lively. You still don't understand. Although Chongzhou is threatened by the northern borderline, it will be a very safe place for the next 2 years. He shook his head and carefully analyzed the situation for Jiangpingji. Even if Nanxing can avoid the destruction of the country, they will have to cede land and pay compensation. They will have to ask for peace and pay tribute. The south will not be stable. In contrast, the north is more comfortable. Even if the northern borderline is ambitious, it will be a matter for a few years. Lu Shi was only going to be the magistrate of Chongzhou. He would oversee Chongzhou for 2 years. When the world was really chaotic, Jiangpingji would take over. The risk was not high, but it was more frightening. Lu Shi understood this logic. After a while, he took out a neatly folded piece of paper from his sleeve. It was stained with ink. Some words could not be read clearly. "What is this?" Jiangpingji took it and looked at it. Lu Shi said, "Master Yuanjing's disciple wrote about the girl who was teased and left in anger." Jiangpingji looked at the assessment from afar, and naturally knew who Lu Shi was referring to. Why did father bring his exam paper out? As she spoke, she carefully unfolded the piece of paper. Just from the handwriting, one would think that it was a gentle and delicate young lady from a noble family. If this paper is seen by others, I'm afraid there will be trouble. Master Yuanjing is really a wonderful person. Sure enough, he accepts disciples based on fate. Lu Shi shook his head. Nowadays, a lot of people complained about the difficulty of studying. Some great Confucian scholars advocate it and appealed to the common people to be able to read and read. However, those were just words. If such a thing really happened, those people would be the ones who resisted the most fiercely. Even if this was a beautiful article, just based on the meaning revealed in it, Wei Ci was useless. Jiangpingji's interest was piqued. She read the article carefully. Although some words were covered by ink, she could guess the meaning of the full text. I didn't know that he had a brain other than his face. Jiangpingji smiled, folded the paper, and stuffed it into her sleeve. Lu Shi choked on her words. What did Wei Ci do? Why didn't my daughter get along with him? Having a brain is useless. Who doesn't know how to talk on paper? Jiangpingji curled her lips. So I need to observe him carefully. Her attention was something that Wei Ci could not avoid. TSK, I really want to see his horrified expression when he finds out the truth. Lu Shi came back to his senses. Wei Ci was born in the Wei family of Lengjia. Although he has fallen, he still has his pride. He may not be easily convinced by you. Jiangpingji raised her eyebrows when she heard Lu Shi's words. I heard from Huayu that the Wei family has moved back to Zhongzhou, but Wei Ci is still in Dongqing. Because Feng Jin told her about the Wei family, she thought that Wei Ci was from a poor family or an ordinary farmer's family. Now that she looked at him, it seemed that he had a background. Lu Shi said uncertainly, maybe he's temporarily tied up for the assessment? If it's for the assessment, he wouldn't have written such a deviant paper. He obviously doesn't want to be selected. Jiangpingji smiled and said, I'm not sure about other people, but I'm confident that I can take down Wei Ci. They were coming for her, so where else could she run to? The father and son talked for 15 minutes. Jiangpingji put on Lu Shi's cloak and went straight to her room. It was late autumn, and the temperature was getting colder every day. Jiangpingji tightened her cloak to block out the cold air outside. Taksha led the way in front with an orange lamp in her hand. The master and servant passed by the courtyard. Jiangpingji suddenly felt a little cold water drip on her eyelashes. She couldn't help but raise her hand to touch it. It's raining. She looked up at the sky. The moon was as white as a jade plate, hanging high in the sky. Taksha heard the movement and carefully identified it. She said, Langjun, it's snowing. Snowing? Jiangpingji blinked and reached out to catch the white flowers falling from the sky. The snowflakes were very small, like fine silver beads. They melted into liquid when they fell on her palm, leaving only a little coldness. It's quite small. Jiangpingji blinked her eyes and muttered in a low voice. It was the first time in her life that she had seen such gentle and harmless snow. In her memory, snow was supposed to fall in sheets or as hard as white pearls, crashing down from the sky. Taksha laughed, and her eyes curved into the shape of a crescent moon. I guess this is the first snow of the year. It's still early. Even if it snows, It will be very small. In another 1 or 2 months, it will really snow. The sky and the earth will be the same color. It will be very beautiful. Jiang Pingji had Luxi's memory. Naturally, she knew when it usually snowed. The snow this year was indeed a little early. The snow was not heavy. Jiang Pingji went back to her room and drank a bowl of cold ginger soup. She took off her clothes and went to sleep. When she woke up the next day, as soon as she opened the door, she was hit by a cold air that was like an icy knife. The courtyard was covered with a layer of white. It was fine yesterday. Why is the snow getting heavier and heavier overnight? Jiang Pingji looked at the sky. Fine snow was falling. Feng Jin was obviously used to it. He ordered the servants to prepare a tea stove and sat opposite Jiang Pingji in the corridor of the courtyard to brew tea. He frowned and looked at the courtyard. It had only been one night, but the snow was already as thick as a knuckle. The weather was indeed unusual. However, since the founding of Dongqing, there had been natural and man-made disasters. It was either a drought or a flood. They were afraid that the nobles would get drunk and enjoy the snow in the garden. They would hold banquets, poetry meetings, and gatherings without a care for the lives of the people outside. Chapter 302. The snow will continue for another day or two. Feng Jin shook his head. It's always like this in Shangjing. It snows earlier and earlier every year. Jiang Pingji looked at the snow-covered roofs in the distance. She frowned as if she was worried about something. On the day of the Qianglin banquet, the snow did not stop. The entire Shangjing city was covered in a layer of white. However, the cold outside could not stop the liveliness of the Qianglin banquet. They toasted each other, sang and danced. The graceful dancers wore watercolored gauze and danced gracefully in the snow. They were like fairies from the ninth heaven, who could ascend to immortality at any time. Jiang Pingji saw their bare feet. Their feet were red and blue from the ice. She suddenly lost the mood. She felt uncomfortable watching it, but the other scholars were watching with great interest. This Master Yuanjing is so powerful. His students have taken 2 of the top 3 places. I heard that if Master Yuanjing's disciple Lu Zheng was not born in a poor family, he would be in the top 3. If that's the case, it's scary. I heard that Master Yuanjing has another disciple. Where is he? Are you talking about Wei Zixiao? I heard that someone spoke rudely to him during the assessment. His temper flared up, and he left after hitting the person. That's a pity. What's there to pity? He hit someone. He's so rude. He doesn't look like a scholar. He's just a boorish man. Jiang Pingji sat in her seat. She was surrounded by scholars of similar status. All of them were gossiping. Some relied on their family's wealth to buy a position, while others relied on their parents to join in the fun. Jiang Pingji belonged to the latter group. She drank some sake in silence, and left the Qianglin banquet with the excuse that she could not hold her liquor. Suke drove the carriage and stopped outside. He saw Jiang Pingji walking over, wrapped in a thick white cloak. From afar, she looked like a moving white ball. He suppressed his laughter and hurriedly got off the carriage to put down the stool. He was not a coachman. He just wanted to see where the Qianglin banquet was held. The commoners had the chance to enter. Suke would never be able to enter if he did not have other opportunities. Jiang Pingji knew what Suke was thinking, so she did not stop him. The weather gets cold really fast. You should wear more clothes when you go out. I told you to wait in the carriage, yet you insist on sitting outside. Isn't this suffering? Here, this is for you to warm your hands, lest you say that I mistreat you behind my back. Suke took the delicate hand warmer. It was small and exquisite, and was wrapped in a thick layer of cloth. It did not burn his hand, and felt like it was meant for a little girl. Lang Jun, you have wronged me. When did I complain about you behind your back? Even if there is, it would be a direct complaint. Suke did not want to provoke Jiang Pingji's eyes. No matter what he had in mind, he couldn't hide it. Rather than hiding it and being laughed at, he might as well come out openly. What a glib tongue! Jiang Pingji said with a smile. Just as she was about to step onto the carriage, she caught a glimpse of Wei Ci, who was dressed in a green Confucian robe, standing in the wind and snow with an umbrella in his hand. She stopped in her tracks and turned to Suke. Take the hand warmer and hide in the carriage. I have something to do. After Suka heard this, he was surprised. He could not help but shift his gaze towards Wuxia. As someone who was obsessed with invisible voices, it was hard for him not to remember anyone with a special voice. Not to mention, other than his moving voice, Wuxia could also be considered a person with a clear demeanor and handsome bones. Jiang Pingji walked forward and teased, Zixiao, are you waiting for me here? Wuxia did not overreact like before. Instead, he said calmly, I'm just waiting here like your accountant. As for who I'm waiting for, it depends on who I'm waiting for. If you think I'm waiting for you, it's okay to think so. Was he mocking her for being narcissistic? Jiang Pingji's expression darkened. She looked at Wuxia with an inquisitive gaze. Wuxia did not avoid her gaze. He looked down and slightly lowered his head to look into her eyes. His eyes were open, not empty like before. As he spoke, he tilted the umbrella in his hand slightly and covered the top of Jiang Pingji's head. The wind and snow are strong. You should go back quickly. Did you write the article yourself? Jiang Pingji asked Wuxia with a serious face. She was not being polite. Wuxia smiled calmly and asked her in reply, Do you think your father leaked the article so that I can find someone to write it for me? Jiang Pingji was silent. It was not because she suspected that Wuxia would find someone to write for him, but she felt that Wuxi's thinking was too different from the literati of the time. If everyone in the world went to study, who would do the farming? If there were more people studying, there would be more people sharing the cake. How would the aristocrats who monopolized the inheritance of knowledge be willing to do that? Wuxia was also born in an aristocratic family. Even if the Wei family of Langia had withered, their ancestors were once prominent. The aristocrats had a sense of pride in their bones. They boasted that their bloodline was superior to others, and that they were born to be superior to others. Either Wuxia really had such a broad vision, or he was just a naive youth who didn't know much about the world. No matter how Jiang Pingji looked at him, Wuxia did not seem to be the latter. You have a glib tongue, she said with a fake smile. It seems that you already know how to maintain your composure in front of me. Wuxi's voice sounded a little relieved. Once bitten, twice shy. Although I dare not be on par with Yumo and the others, I am not a fool without talent. Naturally, I will not fall in the same place twice. If you still want to test me, I am afraid you will be disappointed. Jiang Pingji turned her head to look at him, and said with a drawn-out "Oh, you should be glad that there are many people in carriages here." Wuxia raised his eyebrows. What do you mean? Zixiao is talented and his clothes match the vast snowy scenery. If there is no one around. Jiang Pingji did not finish her sentence. Instead, she raised her eyebrows at him, and gave him a very ambiguous and flirtatious hint. Wuxia suddenly tightened his grip on the umbrella handle, and straightened his expression. Go eat the snow. Jiang Pingji laughed so hard that even her shoulders were shaking. Wuxi's reaction was really interesting. He was like an arrogant cat. Unintentionally, Jiang Pingji looked at the vast snowy landscape and suddenly said this. After the Qionglin banquet, my father is going to resign. Wuxi's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. Your father has just become an official. Why is he going to resign? Take a guess. Wuxia looked at the short man who was not even as tall as his chest and said in a low voice, If you don't intervene, your father may be able to retire and have some peace. Now that the situation in Dongqing is getting more and more serious, the day Nanxing is destroyed will be the day the world will be in chaos. Retiring is a good way to avoid the chaos. But if Langjun intervenes, I'm afraid that this memorial will be a move to advance by retreating. Retreat to advance? That's a good word. Then take a guess, which step am I advancing to? Wuxia closed his eyes. If everything had not changed, the person in front of him would not be so ambitious. At most, she would lead a bunch of bandits to stir up trouble in Dongqing. But now, Wuxia could feel that she wanted to be the emperor many years earlier than she was in the past. If that was the case, he closed his eyes and thought for a while. Then he said two words with certainty. Chongzhou. Fortune was found in danger. Whether it was her in the past or now, Wuxia did not expect her to be steady and sure. You really know me well. Chapter 303. He calmed himself down and asked calmly. From what I can see, don't you know me very well? Jiang Pingji smiled, and did not continue to interrogate Wei Si. Boiling a frog in warm water had to be done slowly. What if a pot of boiling water was poured down and scared people away? She looked like she was looking at the sky, but she was actually paying attention to the paper umbrella in Wei Si's hand. Even though he threw a tantrum and moved the umbrella away, he quietly moved it back and let the snow pile up on his shoulders. Jiang Pingji raised her hand and took off the cloak, indicating for Wei Si to put it on. I'll have to trouble you to take care of me when I study in Langyi. Wei Si glanced at the thick white fur cloak and said calmly, You and I can be considered to be acquaintances. Master also admires your talent. I think you won't face any difficulties in the academy. Why do you need to bribe me? I'm not afraid of the cold or heat, so it doesn't matter how much I wear. But Zixiao is weak, and we're still standing in the snow waiting for someone. It's better to be careful. Jiang Pingji threw the cloak into his arms. He could wear it if he wanted. After that, Jiang Pingji turned and walked to her carriage. She stepped on the bench and said, To the Feng residence. Just as she raised her hand to lift the curtain, Su Ku, who had been watching them, handed the hand stove back to her. The driver of the carriage, who was wearing a bamboo hat, pulled the reins and drove away. He happened to pass by Wei Si. You gave the cloak to Wei Langjun. Takshu will talk about you when you go back. Su Ku knelt near the door of the carriage and put his hands into warm gloves. The thick layer of rabbit fur was very comfortable. Jiang Pingji held the hand stove and added charcoal in it. The temperature was higher than before. Your Langjun is strong and healthy. He can kill 2 cows with his bare hands. Will he get sick without a cloak? Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. He's just a weak scholar. He doesn't wear much, but he's standing outside like a log. Isn't he afraid of catching a cold? Su Ku was suddenly speechless. Indeed, his Langjun looked young and weak, but in fact his fighting ability was off the charts. His appearance was too deceiving. I heard from Huayu that Zixiao's family has moved to Zhongzhou and returned to the clan. He stayed in Langyi alone. Who knows how many maids and old women took care of him? The weather changes so fast. I guess he didn't prepare many clothes to keep warm. Jiang Pingji was a meticulous person, but she rarely took the initiative to care about others. In other words, in her opinion, there was no need to care at all. Everyone had 2 hands and 2 feet. If they couldn't even take care of themselves, wouldn't they be? That wouldn't work in the ancient times. After Su Ku heard this, he couldn't help but sigh. His Langjun seemed to have become more humane. The Jasper Forest banquet seemed to be a celebratory banquet held for a few scholars who had stood out from the crowd. But in reality, it was merely a place for people to sing praises and flatter. Many of the courtiers exerted all their skills, fawning and servile appearances, which made people secretly feel angry. The Qianglin banquet seemed to be a celebration for a few outstanding scholars. But in fact, it was just a place for people to sing praises and flatter. Many officials tried their best to flatter, which made people angry. Han Yu was a hot-tempered person. He didn't have the slightest intention of restraining himself in front of his close friends. Looking at it now, it seems that it was the right decision to beat them up and leave that day as a filial piety. You are so servile and have no backbone at all. It's just... Cheng Jing stared at Han Yu and stopped him from continuing. Be careful with your words. Have you forgotten? Be careful with your words and actions. Have you forgotten these 4 words? Cheng Jing said in a low voice. If you get yourself killed because of this, compared to Han Yu and Cheng Jing's nervousness, Lu Jing secretly stuck out his belly and resisted the urge to eat. There was a lot of delicious food at the Qianglin banquet. Lu Jing was born in a poor family. He was the son of a hunter and liked to roll in the mud since he was a child. If Master Yuanjing hadn't said that he was destined to meet him and brought him back to the academy to teach him, he wouldn't be qualified to stand at the Qianglin banquet. It was a rare opportunity. It would be a waste if he didn't eat. He was not Han Yu or Cheng Jing. He didn't eat much, but he was angry. The walls have ears. You should pay attention. Wenbin, this is not a good place to complain. Lu Jing paced slowly with his belly full. He looked very relaxed, but he was so full that he couldn't walk. Hanyu took a deep breath and tried his best to suppress his anger. From afar, the few of them saw Wei Xi hugging a white velvet cloak in his arms. He stood rooted to the ground in a daze, not knowing what he was thinking. Lu Zheng was thick-skinned enough. He stepped forward with a smile and pretended to reach out to take the cloak from Wei Xi's arms. He even said, "Zixiao is indeed the most considerate. He knows that I'm not wearing much today, so he specially brought the cloak here. I thank him in advance." Before his hand touched the cloak, Wei Xi took a step back and said bluntly, "It's not for you." Lu Zheng wasn't angry. Instead, he sneakily looked at the tie on the collar of the cloak. The end of the tie was decorated with 2 delicate fur balls, which didn't match Wei Xi's style. Not only that, but the size of the cloak was also inappropriate. "Then who is it for?" Lu Zheng asked. Wei Xi ignored him. He glanced at Han Yu and Cheng Jing's expression inside. "You don't look happy. Were you bullied at the banquet?" Han Yu didn't pay attention to the cloak. His attention was drawn back to the Qianglin banquet. The anger that he had suppressed just now came out again. The so-called important officials in the court are all servile and flattering. They don't have any dignity. The court will be finished sooner or later if this continues. Wei Xi glanced around and felt relieved when he didn't see anyone. They are just servile to the bone. Why are you angry with them? Wei Xi smiled carelessly. I heard that before the Qianglin banquet, the head of the secretariat, Feng Ren, resigned and returned to his hometown. Not only did the government not ask him to stay, but they promoted a confidant. Isn't that clear enough for you to see? You want a docile and obedient domestic cat, not a wild cat that is hard to tame and arrogant. Han Yu almost exploded. Who are you calling a wild cat? Wei Xi continued. It's just the Qianglin banquet. You can't control your temper. What will you do in the future? What do you mean? Han Yu asked. Nowadays, the eunuchs secretly sell their titles. The price of each official position is clearly marked, and they give it to anyone who has money. Do you think that it's only the eunuchs who are greedy? The greedy ones are the big ones. Wei Xi and the others got into the carriage. The charcoal in the carriage dispelled the cold air. He pointed to the sky. Wenbin is ranked 3rd in the assessment. When the time comes, he will only get a small official position. It's not even as high as the official positions that those scoundrels buy with money. You will be so angry that 1 Buddha is born and 2 Buddhas will go to heaven. Han Yu almost choked on his words. Wei Zixiao, you are too mean. Wei Xi was not afraid and continued. I have something more mean. Do you want to hear it? Lu Zheng secretly held back his laughter. Cheng Jing shook his head helplessly and fiddled with the silver wire charcoal in the charcoal basin. Chapter 304. Han Yu was a stubborn person. He would jump up and down when Wei Xi provoked him a little. However, Wei Xi didn't continue to bully Han Yu this time. Instead, he sighed. The official's family indulges the eunuchs. They even pretend that they don't see it when they sell titles and positions. As for the relatives of the emperor, when one of them achieves the Tao, all of them follow suit. It's obvious that the official wants to support 2 parties and make things difficult for the aristocratic families. There are 2 reasons for Feng Ren's resignation. Firstly, he wanted to defend his second son Feng Jin against injustice. Secondly, he could tell that Dongqing was seriously ill and could not be saved. Cheng Jing continued. Wenbin's temperament can still be tempered. He is so angry now. What can he do in the future? Feng Ren's resignation had already become a signal. If the other aristocratic families had foresight, they would have left one after another, or stood by indifferently. The vacated positions naturally became the cake that the eunuchs and the relatives of the emperor fought for. No matter which side won, the people they placed in the positions were mostly people with bad intentions, who only cared about their own interests. If the imperial court could still be saved, it would be a blessing in disguise. The corner of Han Yu's mouth twitched. The 2 people in front of him echoed each other, which made him look immature. Xiaoyin, don't you have anything to say? Han Yu asked Lu Zheng for help. Lu Zheng snorted. I have no ambition in my life. I just have enough to eat, wear warm clothes, and have a house to live in. As long as I am an official, I am still an official. I just need to live my own life and take care of the people under my rule. As for the rest, I don't have the ability. Let the capable ones take care of it. Hanyu was so angry that he almost fell down. What kind of help is this? It's a stupid teammate. Chungjing said. Wenbin, don't be stubborn. Do what you should do. It's not a good time to be an official in the current situation. Hanyu felt wronged. Are the three of you here to comfort me or to piss me off? Wei Ci winked mischievously and said to him. I didn't say that I'm here to comfort you. Hanyu was speechless. That was the end of their friendship. According to the previous practice, the scholars who stood out in the assessment would receive the appointment letter from the imperial court within half a month and be dispatched to various places. Regarding the arrangement of scholars, they would generally consider their abilities and family backgrounds. Although their official positions were not high, they were very challenging, and it was easy for them to accumulate experience. In more remote places, the official rank was slightly higher, while in more prosperous places, it was slightly lower. If there were family members making arrangements everywhere, their official positions and locations could also be changed at their discretion. It was very practical. However, now that the court was in chaos, many officials had tacitly forgotten about this matter, and the emperor did not even mention it. Yuan Jing and his entourage stayed in Shangjing for half a month. Many students were worried that something might happen. Wei Ci and the rest were able to settle down. Every day, they would either quietly study and practice calligraphy, or play a few rounds with their classmates and recite poems to pass the time. Lu Zheng was sitting at the side of the chessboard, watching Wei Ci beat Hanyu up. He was suddenly enlightened and suddenly said, It's already been half a month. If I don't go back soon, I'm afraid I'll have to spend the new year in Shangjing. Hanyu looked at the situation on the chessboard and felt his head hurt. It's not good to leave before the appointment letter from the imperial court. Wei Ci placed his chess piece with a smile, forcing Hanyu into a dead end. Perhaps this letter of appointment won't be sent down. Why do you say so? Hanyu asked. Wei Ci said sarcastically, Perhaps. All the vacant official positions have been sold out. Of course, it was impossible for all the official positions to be sold out. However, the imperial court was busy preparing for the marriage between the princess of the northern borderline, Anyina, and the second prince. Dongqing still wanted to wrangle with the northern borderline. All of them wanted to gain benefits for themselves. Why would they care about these scholars? These days, apart from Feng Ren's retirement, it was the retirement of the county chief of Hu County Luxi. For the former, the emperor was happy to take back the position of the head of the secretariat and promote his confidant. For the latter, the emperor wanted to do the same. However, Luxi presented a memorial at the imperial court meeting. Immediately, someone jumped out and said how hard Luxi had worked all these years. Under his rule, Hu County had turned from a desolate and uninhabited county to a major grain-producing county. He had alleviated the food shortage of the two neighboring states. He was a meritorious minister. He was still so young. If he retired, it would be the biggest loss for Dongqing. The speech was so impassioned that the emperor was too embarrassed to accept Luxi's retirement. If that's the case, do any of you have any good suggestions? Although the emperor was shameless, he did not want to embarrass himself at the imperial court meeting. He still had to cover his embarrassment. Luxi took the opportunity to repeat his intention to retire. Another official jumped out and said no. If the emperor agreed, wouldn't the world mistakenly think that the emperor coveted the riches of Hu County and wanted to burn the bridge after crossing it to take the opportunity to seize the fruits of victory from others? Luxi was a brick. He would move wherever there was a shortage. After an intense discussion, someone suddenly mentioned that Chongzhou still lacked a prefecture magistrate. A prefecture magistrate was more important than a county chief. The former managed the land of a state, while the latter managed a small county. Everyone had completely forgotten that Chongzhou only had Shangyu County and Changhe County. Shangyu County had a total of 6 cities. 3 of them were still in the hands of the northern borderline. Its overall area was the smallest among the 6 states of Dongqing. Its north was also connected to the northern borderline. Who knew how long it would take to lose one's head? Although Hu County was only a county, its area was comparable to a state. Moreover, it was now incomparably rich under Lu Shi's governance. The Dongqing emperor weighed the pros and cons in his heart, and decisively made a decision. He pretended to express how much he valued Lu Shi. He also said that the world was in turmoil. If Lu Shi were to retire now, it would be a loss for Dongqing, and a regret for the people. Without a second word, he threw the position of Chongzhou magistrate onto Lu Shi's head. Lu Shi appeared tired and unresigned as he agreed, but in his heart he sighed. He had a godlike teammate by his side. His opponents were all pigs. The difficulty was too low. There was no challenge at all. Lu Shi bore the steaming, freshly baked magistrate of Chongzhou, and went to court with a cold expression. He ignored everyone. He doesn't know what's good for him. He was promoted from a county chief to a prefecture magistrate, and now he's putting on a straight face. Tisk, who doesn't know that Hu County is now in high demand? One county can feed 2 states. How much food is that? From what I see, Lu Shi has no intention of retiring. He's just putting on an act, hoping to stay in Hu County. Who knew that the emperor would transfer him to Chongzhou? Chongzhou, what kind of place is that? 3 wolves are watching from the north. He can't sleep well at night. Oh, isn't that a big loss? Cleverness can be mistaken for cleverness. Who asked him to be so stupid? I wonder who will take over as the county chief of Hu County. In any case, it can't be the 2 of us. Let's just watch the show. Everyone wants a piece of Hu County. The small discussions around him drifted into Lu Shi's ears. His face was still livid. After he boarded the carriage, he suddenly smiled faintly. Cleverness can be mistaken for cleverness? Soon, everyone would know who the real stupid person was. The carriage stopped. Lu Shi got down from the sedan chair. His confidant came forward to speak to him. Master, the person Lang Jun is looking for has been found. Lu Shi was stunned. His expression quickly changed. Found? Yes, they look 70% similar. His confidant gestured a 7. Lu Shi's chest was beating rapidly, as if it was about to jump out of his throat. Chapter 305. Lu Shi's eyes darkened and he ordered, "Bring her to Lanting. She will handle it." Hearing that Lu Shi was going to hand the girl over to Lu Shi, the confidant's face suddenly became bitter. He stuttered and hesitated. Lu Shi saw the situation and said, "Just say what you want to say. You don't have to hide half of it." "I didn't mean to hide it. It's just that. I heard from the master that you want to hand the girl over to Lang Jun. I don't think it's appropriate." The confidant hesitantly moved closer to Lu Shi, and finally said what was on his mind. "That girl's identity is not clean. If Lang Jun's temperament changes, I won't be able to absolve myself of the blame." Lu Shi immediately understood the meaning of the confidant's words. His expression suddenly became very interesting. He hesitated for a while and said, "Follow me." The confidant followed Lu Shi's footsteps, and carefully kept a step away from him. He lowered his head and hands, not daring to look around. "Tell me in detail. What's wrong with the girl's identity?" Although Lu Shi had guessed it, he still had to confirm it. The confidant knelt down. There was no one around, so there was no need to worry about eavesdropping. "The girl I found is 14 years old. Her mother is a lowly prostitute. Her father is unknown." The confidant was very helpless. They had secretly searched for the girl, based on the portrait Lu Shi had given them. The girl was the most similar in appearance and temperament. Although the other candidates were clean, they were not as similar. After thinking about it, the confidant recommended the girl. Lowly prostitute. Lu Shi furrowed his brows. He was very unhappy with the identity. Has she received guests before? He wasn't sure what his daughter wanted to do, but he knew that the girl he found was probably a honey trap. The confidant's expression twisted, and he said carefully, "Master, you also know that prostitutes usually live in shameful slums. Most of the customers who come and go are peddlers and hooligans. Women who grow up in such places are unlucky. At the age of 5 or 6, they are, not to mention, that person is already 14. Lu Shi's face darkened when he heard the confidant. "Bring the girl to Lanting, and let her make a decision." Continue to investigate secretly and see if there are more similar and suitable candidates. The confidant took the order and bowed and left. Lu Shi sat where he was, immersed in the shadows of the room. After a long time, he seemed to have understood something. He held his forehead with one hand, and his expression seemed to be smiling yet not smiling, crying yet not crying. It faintly carried a trace of pleasure of being about to take revenge, which washed away his usual gentleness, and his whole body was surrounded by a cold and poisonous aura. So what if she's the daughter of a prostitute? He seemed to be listless as he murmured in a low voice. His voice was suppressing the viciousness that made one shudder. It made one's hair stand on end. In the future, if I wear that face and use that body to turn Dongqing upside down, then that's what I call delightful. Akeo was born in the slums of the poor. On the day of her birth, it was snowing heavily. Many of the adults froze to death, but she survived. Her mother was a prostitute, and now she was also a prostitute, and a prostitute under her mother. What was a prostitute? The lowest of prostitutes could be casually used for 3 to 5 copper coins. Even though she was scared to death, in order to survive, she had no choice but to feign civility and serve them well. Otherwise, not only would the customers not let her go, but the brothel keeper above her, her mother, would also not let her go. She was always dressed in ragged linen clothes that had been washed and patched. Every day, she had to clean the house, wash the clothes, wash the dishes, and cook. She had to serve the madam and the other prostitutes until they were comfortable. Then, she would lie on the tattered mat and wait for one customer after another. When she was a child, she was carelessly taken advantage of by a few ruffians and lost her virginity. Her mother beat her like crazy, and then forced her to accept customers and inherit her mother's business. She lived in a muddle. Over the years, she did not know how many children were beaten. She had only lived for 14 years, but she felt that she had lived more than half of her life. Even though she was born beautiful, she now had a lot of white hair. Her face was haggard, and her eyes were sunken. She thought that this was the end of her life, but she did not expect to be taken away from the slums by a man dressed in a very powerful outfit 2 days ago. She knelt on the ground, trembling, and her skinny body trembled like a sieve. Her whole body wished she could lie on the ground, and she did not dare to look around. After waiting for a long time, the sound of a paper door opening came from behind her, and unfamiliar footsteps walked past her. After a rustling sound, the person sat directly on the seat of honor. "What's your name?" Judging from the voice, the person should not be old, maybe even younger than Akeo. She had heard many hoarse voices and all kinds of malicious yelling, but she had never heard such a clear and peaceful voice. Her body trembled uncontrollably, and Akeo felt that her mouth was not hers anymore. She even forgot the instinct to open her mouth to speak. Seeing her behavior, Jiang Pingji was not in a hurry to say anything. Instead, she asked Taksha to serve tea and drink it to calm her nerves. The audience in the streaming room had long been looking forward to it. They did not know what the streamer was up to, who was so important that she would leave behind the remaining chessboard and the young man Feng Jin, and come over so quickly. Looking at it now, it did not seem to be much. Lao Siji Lianmeng. I feel that the streamer would not do unnecessary things. She attaches so much importance to this person. Her identity must be very powerful. To Siji Zhuwu, #laugh-teehee. Maybe she is the streamer's younger sister who is stranded outside. There are no clues. I can't guess the streamer's intentions. I'd better get a small stool and watch slowly. After waiting for a while, Jiang Pingji felt that the other party's emotions had stabilized. So she asked again, "What's your name?" Akeo's ears were flushed, and she felt a sense of inferiority that she could not wait to crawl into the ground. "My name is Akeo." Although Akeo did not sound nice, it was a proper name. "Akeo." Jiang Pingji heard it and asked again, "Do you know who asked you to come here?" Akeo's thin and weak body trembled, and she said in a low voice like a cat, "I don't know. I vaguely remember that it was a master." For Akeo, people who were neat and tidy were considered wealthy. She had never seen the clothes worn by Lu Shi's confidant. such a dignified person could be considered a master? Jiang Pingji asked again. Then do you know why you are here? Akeo bit her lower lip, and there was a little embarrassment on her thin and weak face. Only then did she slowly sit up straight with her head hanging down. She put her hands on her waist and pretended to pull off the belt around her waist. If it was on a normal day, Akeo would at most be wrapped in a tattered dress, and she would wear nothing underneath. Because she was poor, she could not afford to wear it. Besides, it was useless for a prostitute to wear clothes. In the end, she would have to strip naked to serve others. Lu Shi's confidant brought her back and asked the maid to prepare a complete set of clothes for her. She washed it from head to toe with soap several times. Chapter 306. Therefore, she untied the belt around her waist and only unbuttoned the outer layer of clothes. She was still wrapped in 2 or 3 layers of clothes. Jiang Pingji saw that and stood in front of Akeo. Akeo clenched her fists nervously and embarrassedly. She thought that a strange body would press down on her, but she saw a pair of clean, white hands in her sight. They were really clean. Even the round fingernails had a transparent luster. The clothes that were taken off were neatly put back on by those hands. The belt was tied in a beautiful knot at the waist. I didn't ask you to come here to do this. Naturally, the excited veterans in the streaming room, who were waiting for the girl to take off her clothes and offer herself for sex, could stop for a while. Akeo no longer lowered her head. She thought that she was hiding something and quietly raised her head. She wanted to see Jiang Pingji's face. She was stunned when she saw her face. She was younger than she had imagined. Such a young noble family's young master would also seek pleasure in the slums? She was confused. Then, what should I do? Akeo asked in a daze. Enjoy life. Jiang Pingji looked at Akeo's face carefully. According to Lu Shi's confidant, this girl was 70% similar to that girl. If she was taken good care of, she would probably look even more similar when she grew up in the future. It was as if she had been reborn. As the saying went, beauty was in the bones, not in the skin. Even if the girl was very thin and her face was tired, she was still beautiful. Enjoy life. Yes, live like a concubine. A concubine? Akeo widened her eyes in shock. That was the emperor's daughter, the high and mighty princess, right? A very beautiful face. It will let you live the best life for the rest of your life. Jiang Pingji did not hide her praise. Even if Akeo had gray hair, a thin body and a haggard face, she still had a kind of beauty. Akeo also came to her senses at this moment. Her expression changed, and she was a little thoughtful. There was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. How could such a good thing happen to her? If she had such a good life, how could she have been bullied by a few hooligans when she was 7 or 8 years old? She had to crawl home half dead. She had been so wronged, and she was even beaten by her mother with a matchstick. Her mother scolded her for being indecent and saying that she was born to be a slut. He had suffered so much in the past, so why did good things befall him now? I will let you live more comfortably than Empress concubine. Jiang Pingji sat in front of Akeo. She did not deliberately explain anything. She just waited for her reaction. Then, what should this lowly servant do to live better than Empress concubine? Akeo secretly tightened her sleeves. She could not help but feel nervous and afraid when facing Jiang Pingji. Jiang Pingji smiled. The girl in front of her was of low birth, but she was very smart. She could be molded. Be loyal to me. Even if you have to cross a mountain of daggers or a sea of flames, you have to step over it for me. If you work for me, I'll let you live a better life. Equivalent exchange. There was nothing in this world that could be enjoyed without sewing. I know what your life was like in the past. It's not an exaggeration to say that it was hell on earth. Are you really willing to be treated as a commodity for the rest of your life and be bullied for a few copper coins? Akeo's heart skipped a beat. Countless disgusting faces flashed in front of her eyes, from the hooligans of 12 or 13 to the shameless old men of 50 or 60. She could not help but ask herself, this person said that she had value. Should she not seize it and continue to live a life that everyone despised? She no longer wanted to live the life of receiving and sending people off. If she continued, sooner or later, She would die under a man's body. She was only 14 years old this year, but she had already seen the outcome of aging. Her mother valued those fresh and young prostitutes more. There was a fixed number of customers every day. She was the only one who had to take off her clothes to serve when someone paid. Why? People in this line of work eat to show their age. You're already 14 years old. After working for so many years, even the most delicate flowers will be destroyed. Akeo could not help but think of the 11-year-old girl that her mother had newly bought. Her voice echoed in her ears, and she could not help but shiver. Clenching her teeth, Akeo could not help but grab Jiang Pengji's sleeves with both hands. She begged and sobbed, "I'm not resigned to this. Don't send me back. Then work for me." Jiang Pengji's voice did not fluctuate at all, as if she was just informing her of one thing. Okay. The audience in the streaming room expressed that their worldview was once again shattered by the streamer. Was she streaming how to abduct and sell people? Kwachuankai. I'm stunned. Even human traffickers are not as domineering as the streamer. Lao Siji Lianmeng. I seem to understand a little. The streamer wants to play a honey trap? Nugatang. Honey trap? People come willingly for the honey trap. The streamer is coaxing and coercing, isn't she? Yinyu Ajia Zhugachinma. I can tell that you didn't watch the streaming carefully. The streamer's words just now obviously revealed a message. This little girl may have lived an inhumane life in the past. Didn't you see the bruises on her neck? The streamer wants to use her to play a honey trap and sell her body. The little girl can also take the opportunity to escape from hell and live a good life. It's an equivalent exchange. Even so, some audience in the streaming room still could not accept it. Jiang Pengji, the streamer, was challenging their worldview. However, it seemed that some audience in the streaming room had a more twisted worldview than Jiang Pengji. Lao Siji Lianmeng. Streamer, you can't be so straightforward. Who knows if a person who can be moved by benefits will be attracted by better benefits? You should move her with emotions and reason. Little girls are more emotional and easy to deceive. I believe you can do it. Yinyu Ajia Zhugachinma. Well, although the person above is a little cold-blooded, you do need to be more cautious. There's nothing wrong with that. The audience in the streaming room. According to Jiang Pengji's personality, how could she not consider these things? She could see clearly what kind of person Akeo was. Lu Shi's illegitimate daughter married Wu Majun. There were at least 2 years of buffer time. Within these 2 years, it all depended on whether Akeo could pass the test and become a valuable chess piece. Moreover, Jiang Pengji did not need Akeo to do anything dangerous. She only needed to make herself fair and plump, dress up beautifully every day, avoid conspiracies and tricks, and live a lazy and comfortable life. With this face alone, she was destined to be praised to the skies. The name Akeo is not good. Change it. Jiang Pengji tilted her head and thought about it. She said meaningfully, Huijun, this is the name. Akeo did not know what the word Huijun was, but it sounded very proper and pleasant. It did not sound like a poor girl could use it at all. She bowed and bowed. Thank you, Master Langjun. You work for me. Naturally, I can't treat you unfairly. Jiang Pengji asked her. What do you want to do the most now? Akeo. The current Huijun thought about it seriously and asked her timidly. What do you want to do the most no matter what? I will definitely do it for you as long as it is within my capabilities. Huijun bit her lip. Her face was pale, but she said firmly, I want to kill a few people. They are all bad people who deserve to die. If it were not for those ruffians, she might not have become a prostitute. Even though she knew that it was unrealistic, because her mother had taken a fancy to her face long ago, and felt that she was a rare commodity, but she had lost her chastity. In her mother's eyes, she was worthless. Chapter 307. Jiang Pengji placed her fingers together in a comfortable and happy posture. Remember to hide Huijuan's identity so that no one finds out. Lu Shi's confidant was stunned when he heard the name Huijun. He couldn't remember who she was for a moment. Jiang Pengji saw his confusion and explained, Huijun is the girl just now. Find someone to change her identity. The confidant accepted the order and said firmly, Don't worry, Langjun. I will clean up her identity. Be careful. Don't give yourself away. After saying this, Jiang Pengji reminded him worriedly. Fabricating a household registration out of thin air is the easiest way to expose flaws. It's better to find someone who hasn't been cancelled and let Huijun replace it. Jiang Pengji tapped her fingers on the table. The household registration system in this era was very backward. Unlike her era, there was almost no possibility of fraud. In ancient times, because of backward technology and inconvenient transportation, many people didn't have household registration. Many people on the household registration died or disappeared, and they didn't cancel it for more than a decade. This kind of identity was very difficult to verify, and it was easy to take advantage of loopholes. Instead of taking the risk of creating a new identity for Huijun, it was better to let her replace the identity of someone who had similar experiences as her. Lu Shi's confidant nodded and accepted the order. Jiang Pengji said, I have nothing else to do here. You can leave. Since he was a confidant that Lu Shi valued, his ability to handle matters naturally could not be underestimated. Soon the matter was settled. Akao's mother, your Akao is back. Quickly go back and see. The woman who was called Akao's mother wore heavy makeup. Her clothes were frivolous, revealing a large area of her fair chest. She waved a yellowish fan in her hand. Her face was smeared with low-quality rouge, and her lips were painted with thick lipstick. Her slender waist and plump buttocks swayed gently. The curve made many ruffians who passed by jealous. They only felt that their throats were a little hot. What are you shouting about? She's back. That wicked girl left with the nobles for 2 or 3 days. She's forgotten about me. What a traitor. The woman's actual age was only in her early 30s, but she looked like a woman in her 40s. Despite the heavy makeup, some signs could still be seen in her eyes. She must have been a beauty when she was young. However, because one's appearance came from one's heart, her eyes and brows always carried a bit of maliciousness and harshness, which made people's hearts beat fast and not dare to get close to her. No, Akao's mother. Akao, she. The one who came to report the news was also a poor woman who lived in the slums. Although she looked down on Akao's mother for selling herself, selling her daughter, and harming other women, she still felt a little pity for Akao, who was a girl who grew up under her watch. She's just a little girl. It's fine if she comes back, but she wants me, her mother, to kneel and welcome her? The woman had a bad premonition, but she was more annoyed with her neighbor. Your Akao is gone. What? Her money tree was dead? The woman was so shocked that her expression changed. She hurriedly followed her neighbor back home. There were already many people watching the show in front of the broken door. The woman rudely pushed the onlookers away and walked into the dark room. There was a girl in disheveled clothes in the room. She was her prostitute. She had just received a guest not long ago, and her face was still numb. She held the few pieces of rags that could not be wrapped around her body and shivered. There was a roll of mat in the middle of the room, and the mat was wrapped into a spring roll. The woman went forward to take a closer look and almost fainted. She lifted the mat with trembling hands and saw a female corpse with a festered face and a rough outline lying on the ground. Not to mention the face, the body was covered with marks of whipping and sex. The woman did not believe that it was Akao. She quickly tore the clothes on the female corpse and turned it over. There was a little red on the buttocks. This was Akao's birthmark. At this time, she had to accept the fact that Akao was taken out by her benefactor and was humiliated and tortured to death. Most of the onlookers were residents near the slums. They knew how this woman usually treated Akao. Even an enemy would not humiliate others like this. Now that Akao was dead, it was exactly what this woman wanted. But the poor girl died too miserably. To their surprise, the woman who should have spat on the corpse did not humiliate the corpse. Instead, she collapsed on the corpse and burst into tears. The blue veins on her forehead bulged, and her tears and snot smeared the heavy makeup on her face, which made the onlookers feel very strange. Akao's mother has already. Alas, I'm sorry for your loss. Tidy up this child, so that she can die with dignity. The woman who informed the woman could not bear it, and came up to persuade her gently. Yes, Buy a better coffin for a KO. Those beasts sent her back and gave us 10 taels of silver. According to the price of 1 or 2 copper coins for a prostitute, she did not know how many times she had to sell the coffin for 10 taels of silver. In the eyes of the onlookers, the price of this compensation was worth it. The woman cried so hard that she almost could not breathe. She only survived after her neighbor pinched her philtrum. Duckweed. Body. Like duckweed. The woman only felt that the scenery before her eyes was spinning, as if the world had turned upside down. She mumbled in a low voice, "Slut. Hui. Yin. You made me so miserable." After that, her head tilted, and she actually breathed her last. With such a big thing happening in the slums, there were naturally many onlookers watching the show. No one knew that 4 dirty local ruffians had quietly disappeared. There were 4 more corpses in the mass grave outside the city. Each of them was stabbed with a dagger and died of blood loss. It's almost time. It's time to go. Huinyangzi, a KO, who should have died, stood near the mass grave and looked at the 4 corpses that could not be identified with their original appearance. Her gaze was complicated. Her blood-stained hands were still trembling, and her 2 calves were trembling non-stop. But there was an unprecedented carefree feeling in her heart. "Well, I'm coming." She put on the wide hood of the cloak, covering most of her face, only revealing her slender chin. She clenched both sides of the cloak tightly with both hands to block the cold wind outside. She stepped on the sedan chair and entered the inconspicuous carriage. The carriage quietly left the mass grave. As the chaos passed, she was also buried here. Only Huijun was alive. "Are you sure?" You heard Akao's mother mention the name Huiyan? When Lu Shi heard the reply of his confidant, his expression was a little strange. The confidant was originally worried that there would be changes, so he pretended to be a poor person and mixed in with the onlookers. But he did not expect to have an unexpected gain. "Yes, I'm sure. Huijun. Huiyun." Lu Shi silently said it twice. The pronunciation was the same, but the words were different. The former was the new name that Lanting gave to Akao. It was impossible for Akao's mother to know. In that case, the name that she muttered before she died could only be that woman. Chapter 308. This year's first snowfall lasted for more than half a month. The weather became colder day by day. Many houses were crushed by the snow, and the number of casualties was unknown. A few aristocratic families in Shangjing opened granaries and set up porridge stalls everywhere. Even more wealthy families continued to lead a befuddled life. Jiang Pingji was temporarily staying in the Feng residence. When she heard that there was a porridge stall, she followed Feng Jin out to distribute porridge to the people. The snow continued to fall outside. Several rows of commoners had already lined up in front of the porridge stall. Almost all of them looked haggard and wore thin clothes. Some of the commoners wore rather thick clothes, but they were covered with patches of various sizes. I wonder how many people have been crushed to death by this heavy snow, and how many people have been frozen to death. The manservant at the porridge stall looked at the endless queue and whispered to the manservant beside him. His words were filled with pity and sympathy. Even though 2 large pots had been set up, the porridge was still not enough for the common people. His companion was so busy that his feet didn't even touch the ground. "Stop talking nonsense. Work is more important. How can the life of a noble be the same as that of a lowly commoner?" Jiang Pingji helped to scoop up the porridge or carry firewood to start the fire. Feng Jin, a weak scholar, was so tired that his forehead was sweating. There was no noise or cue cutting, and the lively audience in the live broadcast room was silent for a long time. The atmosphere was extremely depressing, and some of the audience could not help but feel a lump in their throats. They did not have the courage to continue watching, and no one sent those immoral bullet screens to CG dance. Although we always complain about how cold it is in winter, so cold that we shiver and complain that there is no natural heating in the south, and it is very cold in winter. But we are living a happy life now, really, to CG dance. There is no natural heating in this area, but we can buy a heater from Taobao. It can be used to adjust the heat. If you are not afraid of wasting electricity, you can stay indoors in winter, and still wear summer clothes. These were almost impossible in ancient times. The rich could wear more clothes and burn high-quality charcoal for warmth. But what about the common people? That's right, where are the commoners? Too many people could not afford to buy clothes to keep out the cold, could not afford to live in a house to block the wind, and could not afford to light a charcoal fire to heat the house. And this was in Shangjing, which was under the feet of the emperor. If this was the case here, what would happen to the surrounding areas of Shangjing? How many houses had collapsed? How many people had been crushed to death? And how many innocent lives had been frozen to death? Without any external conditions, he could only rely on his body to withstand the cold. If he could not withstand it, he would freeze to death. System, can I use popularity points to exchange for food? Warm clothes are fine too. Jiang Pingji secretly asked the system. No, the host's level is too low, unless you choose to level up. The system's cold, mechanical voice fell into Jiang Pingji's ears, and she felt an unprecedented desire to kill. Jiang Pingji secretly calculated the total number of points in her backhand account and asked, I can exchange for food just by leveling up? What's the ratio? The system replied, 10,000 points can be exchanged for 50 kilograms of food. 10,000 points could be exchanged for 50 kilograms of grain. Jiang Pingji now had more than 3 million points. On the surface, it seemed that she could exchange them for a lot of food. However, Jiang Pingji was not someone who was easily fooled. The system didn't answer the first question. Even if it upgraded to level 3, it still didn't have the right to exchange for it. Let's not talk about this. To advance from a level 2 host to a level 3 host, he would need to spend 1 million popularity points. If all of them were exchanged, the remaining popularity points would not be able to be exchanged for much food according to the ratio given by the system. This was a trap. Forget it. I can't rely on you at all. Jiang Pingji replied coldly, and turned her head to think of other ways. The system held its breath, but it did not dare to argue with Jiang Pingji. Unless Jiang Pingji chose to use her popularity points to level up, the system could not do anything to the host. The Feng family was one of the few aristocratic families in Shangjing that chose to open a porridge stall. They cooked porridge from day to night, but it was still in short supply. A bowl of porridge was not sticky, but it could at least fill one's stomach and warm up one's cold body. Jiang Pingji helped at the porridge stall for a few days, but she still did not hear any orders for disaster relief, let alone rice and winter clothing for disaster relief. Lu Shi returned from the morning assembly, and he looked more and more tired. He said with a gloomy face, I've written to the emperor many times, but the emperor always used the second prince's wedding as an excuse to evade it several times. Today he finally relented, but he gave this task to an official with the surname Sure. That person is greedy by nature, and he plucks feathers from every goose that passes by. I don't know how many people will embezzle the 20,000 taels of silver that were allocated, and how much will end up in the hands of the people. Although the world was not really chaotic, how much better was it than chaotic times? Jiang Pingji had been helping at the porridge stall for the past few days, or distributing winter clothing to the people, so she was the most familiar with the situation of the snow disaster. She snorted coldly. 20,000 taels of silver is not enough, let alone after being exploited and embezzled. What can it do? Lu Shi sighed. I've already secretly purchased a batch of food and sent it north to Shangjing, hoping to slightly alleviate the urgent situation. In the current world, whatever he did would be a drop in the bucket. It was better to solve the hidden problems from the root. After another 3 days, the snow finally stopped. Jiang Pingji looked at the invitation, and her smile was very cold. The second prince is getting married, and I am not related to him. Why would I go there? The vast city of Shangjing was covered in white snow, and the sky and earth were the same color. The princess of the royal family of the northern borderline wore a bright red wedding dress, and with the exception of the Dongqing emperor, she sat in a sedan carried by 16 people. The sedan was decorated with gold, silver, and jade, and hung with red satin, which shone under the sunlight. It was very luxurious. The wedding procession wore festive new clothes, and they entered Shangjing through the gate of the city. They walked around the city, and the people on both sides of the street cheered and gave their blessings. Hundreds of tables were set up next to the prince's palace, and the court officials and noble ladies went in and out. It was very lively. In sharp contrast, in a remote corner of Shangjing, there were stiff corpses that were dug out from the ruins. One by one, the frozen corpses were piled up in cart after cart. Jiang Pingji wore a plain dress, and her long hair was tied up with a wooden hairpin. Her expression was as cold as ice. The way of the world. It was really time for a change. Jiang Pingji ordered the manservant who was cleaning up the corpses, "Bury them well. The weather is cold now, and the corpses will not rot easily, but we can't neglect them because of this. If the corpses are piled up and not dealt with, it will easily become an epidemic when spring comes. Don't worry, Langjun. I will do it properly." At the same time, in another place in Shangjing, Lu Zheng was holding a plate and chewing the slightly cold white cake. He sighed and said, "It has been almost a month since the evaluation, and the imperial court still hasn't issued a letter of appointment. I think there is no hope this year. Master has decided to leave for Langyi in 2 days. I really don't want to come back to Shangjing again." Han Yu heard the sound of the wind blowing outside, and he was very annoyed. Many people had frozen or starved to death, and the government still held such a grand wedding for the second prince, which was even bigger than the crown prince's wedding. Chapter 309. Han Yu wasn't in the mood to study because of the noise outside. Lu Zheng, on the other hand, was eating happily. Seeing that Han Yu was still frowning, Lu Zheng's eyes flickered, and he asked casually, interrupting Han Yu's thoughts, "Where did Zixiao go? I didn't see him this morning, and he wasn't reading in the morning either." Han Yu came back to his senses and asked, "You didn't see him either?" Lu Zheng ate a plate of white cakes and drank a big bowl of hot tea. The coldness in his body evaporated. "I didn't see him. This plate of white cakes was his breakfast. He didn't want to eat it because it was cold, so I cooked it and ate it." Lu Zheng patted his chest to calm himself down, then gulped down a big bowl of hot tea. The warm feeling made him feel a little sleepy. Han Yu's mouth twitched, as if he could already imagine Wei Si's embarrassment when he came back and found that his food was gone. Where was Wei Si, whom they were talking about at the moment? He was wearing a plain scholarly robe and a cloak that barely protected him from the cold. He went to the snow-stricken slums with 2 servants and a cart. Many slums that had been in disrepair for a long time had collapsed, making the already difficult roads extremely rugged. It was not easy for the people to get in and out of the slums. There was no porridge stall nearby. So many families had a hard time making a living. The thin elderly and children could only starve or freeze to death in the freezing weather. Wei Langjun is here. As soon as he arrived at the entrance of the alley, a 7 or 8-year-old girl ran into the alley joyfully. Not long after, more than 20 thin old women, or children less than 10 years old, came out with bowls in their hands. Wei Si asked the servants to stop the cart and lifted the thick quilt covering the cart. There were 4 big buckets on the cart. Even though they were covered with lids, there was still sweet and fragrant hot air coming out. "Don't worry, everyone has a share." Although Wei Si didn't show much of an expression, beautiful people always had some privileges. The people were quite touched that he came to deliver food every day. They had long let down their guard, and were not afraid of this fairy-like Langjun. Instead, they liked him very much. Not long after, the 3 large buckets of steamed buns were all distributed, and the large bucket of thick porridge was also emptied. The leftovers were also scraped clean. At this moment, Wei Si realized that the hem of his clothes was being tugged by someone. He looked down and saw that the little girl with an ashen face was staring at him with her clear eyes. Her eyes were filled with admiration. Through those eyes, he seemed to see another child, and his heart softened. Squatting down, he looked her in the eye and asked, "Have you completed the task I gave you 2 days ago?" The girl nodded heavily, and her yellowish face blushed. She answered happily, "Yes, everything is done." The houses collapsed, crushing countless people who were sleeping to death. The roads were blocked, cutting off the connection between the people in the slums and the outside world. Wuxia hired the young and strong men from the slum to provide them with 3 meals a day. He also gave them extra wages to clear the rocks and snow on the road. If not for that, the big cart behind them would not have been able to be pushed in. Under the pressure of the snow, more houses would have suffered. The girl in front of him lost her mother in the snow disaster, and her father's leg was broken by a fallen beam. He could not work at all, losing their only labor force. One could imagine the life of this family of 2. Wuxia smiled and gave her a task. He asked her to remember the people who cleared the snow and rocks. He paid her daily wages and gave her warm clothes. The child was very concerned about this, and did it very seriously. Very well done, he praised. The child smiled and opened her mouth, revealing her gums that were missing a few teeth. She seemed to realize that this was not good, so she shyly closed her mouth. Wuxia asked the servants to settle the wages for the day, and asked them to move a few bags of food from the cart, leaving some food for each family. I won't be coming in 2 days. There are still some food and money here. Keep it for everyone. Wuxia's family was considered to be in decline, but a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Before the Wei family moved, they left him a lot of money, enough for him to live a life without worries. It was just that he followed Master Yuanjing to the capital for the assessment. At first, he did not expect to encounter such a thing, so he did not bring much with him. Thank you, benefactor, for your great kindness. The crowd expressed their gratitude. Some of the elderly even wanted to kneel down, but they were all stopped by Wuxia. After leaving the slum, Wuxia sighed with worry. Personal strength was always weak. Even if he spent all his wealth, what could he do? The guest house that Wuxia stayed in was not close to the second prince's residence, but if he wanted to go back, he had to pass by there. The further away from the slum, the neater and more luxurious the surrounding houses were. The road under his feet also changed from a muddy dirt road to a neat stone road. It was hard to imagine that such a slum, and the courtyard house in front of him, would be in the same area. Seeing that there was a majestic guard of honor in front of him, he asked the servant to stop the cart at the side and make way for them. Langjun, the second prince's residence, is on the street ahead. Do you want to make a detour? The servant pushed the cart and asked anxiously. 100 tables of banquets occupied the entire street. Ordinary people were not even allowed to go near, and even the servants could not enter. Let's make a detour, lest we offend the nobles and cause unnecessary trouble. Wuxia lowered his eyes and tightened the 2 sides of his cloak. He frowned, leaving some wrinkles. The second prince's residence was originally the property of a high-ranking official in Shangjing. Later, it was confiscated, and the government gave this area to the second prince. The residence was expanded and renovated. Almost the entire street was within the scope of the second prince's residence, so it would take a lot of time to make a detour. From afar, Wuxia saw the corner door of the second prince's residence open, and buckets of swill were transported to the swill cart. After a long while, the buckets of swill were moved, and the vermilion corner door was quietly closed. From afar, Wuxia heard the servants who were transporting the swill whispering to each other. "Sai, how is this swill? It's obviously buckets of silver. I look at those dishes, they're neat and tidy. Some of them have only been moved a few times, and some of them haven't even been touched. They're just poured into the buckets of swill like garbage. Outside, I don't know how many people are starving to death. Even if these can't be finished and thrown to those people to eat, many people can still be saved," the other cook said. "Do you want to die? What nonsense are you spouting here? If the nobles hear this, it's a small matter if you lose your job. I'm afraid you might even lose your life. What right do those lowly people outside have to eat what the nobles have eaten? Otherwise, why do they say that people have a golden spoon in their mouths and are born noble, while we are the peasants in the fields, born to be trampled upon? You still have the cheek to talk about me. Aren't you also not careful with your words?" The 2 cooks bickered for a while, then sighed and quietly drove the carriage away from the back door of the residence. When Wuxia heard this, he felt as if he was in an ice house, and cold air rushed from the soles of his feet to his brain. A pair of mocking eyes flashed before his eyes, causing his heart to tighten. "Your Majesty, You're right. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.